Hey guys. This is part 4 of What If Naruto Was Trained by Kurama. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 13, 10 Girls and a Boy. 1 week after beginning of final academy year, Naruto and friends were sitting quietly in a classroom awaiting their new instructor, Umino Irika. To most observers, it looked like a normal classroom full of obedient students silently waiting on their sensei to begin their lessons for the day. However, a more keen eye would notice that nearly all the students in the room were fidgeting slightly with nervous expressions. It was easy to feel the palpable tension slowly rising in the air by the second. They were awaiting Naruto's hazing of the new instructor like he had been doing at the beginning of every year since entering the academy. He always unleashed his pranks exactly a week after the start of each year to test the person. So far, no instructor survived the hazing intact, and the classmates wondered if Irika was the one to do it. They were able to determine already that he was a capable and sharp shinobi from the past week under his instructions. Naruto was sitting up several rows in the center of the classroom, leaning back and balancing his chair on its rear legs. His feet were propped up on his desk with his hands interlocked behind his head in a relaxed manner. He was smiling lazily, as if he didn't have a care in the world. What are you planning for Irika-sensei?" Inuzuka Kiba called out from the front row, his voice tinged with some nervousness. His small white Nikken, Akamaru, whined with some discomfort as well from atop the Inuzuka heir's head. "Don't worry, I won't be using fleas this time. Sorry again about last year. I didn't think they'd get on you guys that far from Toki-sensei." Naruto replied, but an amused smirk showed he wasn't that sorry. "I feel loads better," Kiba retorted sarcastically. "I just noticed you failed to mention there won't be collateral this time. Why make promises I'm not sure I can keep?" Naruto replied with an obvious fox-like expression. At that reply, everyone in the classroom tensed as they became alert for anything, including the usually brooding Sasuke. Two small and slender hands lightly swatted Naruto on both sides of his head. It didn't make him flinch, though. He slowly shifted his eyes to the right to find a fuming platinum blonde, and then to the left to see a slightly glaring pair of pale eyes. "That collateral had better not include me," Yamanaka Ino muttered with narrowed eyes. "Naruto-kun, you shouldn't scare our classmates," Hyuga Hinata admonished gently. "Come on, girls, you know me. My pranks don't hurt people too much." Naruto whispered the last two words, but they heard them clearly. This earned the blonde a growl from Ino and a glare more powerful than the famous Hyuga glare from Hinata. Her patented Hinata glare finally forced him to raise his hands in a weak defense. "For someone as sweet as you, your expression right now is scarier than the rest of your clan combined," Naruto quipped with a half-grin. Hinata smirked slightly, somewhat proud she had some reign on whom she knew to be the most powerful person in her age group. "Do I scare you too?" Ino cut in with the same prideful smirk. "Not really. It's par for the course from you, like it's been for years. It's quite refreshing, actually. It means I'm gonna have a normal day," Naruto retorted with a faux cheerful smile to his fellow blonde, who was now trembling dangerously with her long hair shadowing her eyes. "That man speaks the truth," Shikamaru's voice drawled lazily somewhere from the back of the classroom. "Nah. Rule 2. Ino growled threateningly with a throbbing vein on her temple, and was about to dispense some horrific violence on him for his sass when the trio heard an imitation of a whip being cracked. They all glanced over at Kiba to see him making whipping motions. The rest of the class sniggered as the girls blushed lightly at the teasing. Naruto just laughed monotonously. "Ha, that's funny coming from a clan heir so whipped by his mom and sister he might as well check if he grew a vagina yet," he mocked with a smirk. That remark earned him a growl and a middle finger from the Inuzuka clan heir along with more swats on the head from the two heiresses. "I always knew he's dickless." An extremely pale and emotionless black-haired boy, dressed in all black and sitting in the last row, interjected in an even and monotone voice. Kiba growled with a comically angry tick on his head, looking like he would tear apart the next person who insulted him. "Would you stop that, Sai? What's with you and your fixation on that part of men?" Sakura called out from her seat next to Sasuke with an angry and embarrassed blush on her cheeks. Sai turned his emotionless gaze toward the pink-haired girl. "I apologize for inadvertently making you fantasize about the Uchiha's male anatomy, even though I'm convinced he's more likely to be dickless than Inuzuka-san. What? How dare you? She growled as she got to her feet and raised a fist in a threatening manner. Sasuke developed a constant eye twitch while somehow managing to remain still in his brooding pose, despite his overwhelming desire to throttle the pale-skinned boy. Naruto was still surprised, even now, that Ino didn't rise to the Uchiha's defense like her pink-haired friend. Instead, she actually snickered quietly. She hadn't been paying much attention to the raven-haired teen for months now, and he had to admit he liked this change in her. It was like he was slowly getting all of his first friend ever back since she began dividing her attention between him and Sasuke several years ago. To think all it took was an intervention on his part. He shook it off, not wanting to remember that painful yet rewarding day. Instead, he thought back to when Sai was suddenly introduced to the class as a transfer last week. He and the rest of his classmates found this odd, especially when the pale boy's odd and emotionless mannerisms came out right away. It didn't take the blonde long to realize that Sai might have been inserted into the class by Shimura Danzo, considering what he learned about that paranoid war hawk from Jiraiya last summer. The only question at this point was if the insertion had something to do with the jinchuriki, or the last Uchiha. Naruto shook that thought off as well, figuring he'd likely get his answer over the coming year, and refocused on the dialogue still going on. He has almost all the females our age, and even some older ones, falling over themselves at his feet, and he hadn't given any a second look. You have a better chance of becoming a raging lesbian than getting a date from him, howler monkey. Sai retorted in the same monotone before finishing with a painfully fake smile. Sakura was so startled by such a straightforward insult that she just sputtered and sat down to let her brain reboot. Meanwhile, the whole class was chuckling at the exchange, until Naruto suddenly stopped as he flinched. Clone outside just dispelled. Iruka-sensei's coming, he whispered as he set his chair back down on all four legs, but still retained his relaxed posture. The girls sighed and decided to just let the scene play out. Ino was used to his behavior for years and knew she could never change that part of him, and wouldn't try it anyway because it was usually funny and endearing to her. The polite and proper part of Hinata did not approve of her future lover's hazing of their sensei, but her rebellious part, though small, found it quite thrilling. She wasn't able to cause too much trouble outside her clan's compound because she had to uphold the Hyuga clan's reputation as its heiress to a degree. Because of that, she sometimes found herself living vicariously through his pranking ways. Everyone in the classroom fidgeted in anticipation as they heard footsteps growing louder outside the door until they suddenly stopped. In the deafening silence that followed, the usually quiet sliding door sounded like rough stones grating loudly against each other, as it slowly slid open to show a bored-looking Yumino Iruka gazing down at a clipboard. Naruto smirked as he twitched his left ring finger slightly, pulling a nearly invisible wire taut. "Oh whoops! Dropped my pen!" Iruka innocently muttered as he practically threw the item down to the floor, before crouching down to pick it up. At that exact moment, a hidden modified exploding tag on the doorframe burst into a small spray of pink paint, passing through the space Iruka's head was occupying just an instant ago and right onto the unsuspecting face of Mizuki, who was following behind his superior into the classroom. The sky blue-haired assistant instructor let out a yelp as he clutched at his now pink face with both hands. Meanwhile, Iruka straightened up and continued, ignoring the commotion behind him as he resumed writing on his clipboard. Raising an eyebrow in intrigue, Naruto twitched his left middle finger this time. The scarred man made a sharp left turn toward a student sitting in the front row with a pleasant smile. Meanwhile, a filled balloon dropped from a hidden spot in the ceiling right under the spot Iruka sidestepped. However, the balloon still found a target as the temporarily distracted Mizuki stumbled right underneath it. It burst on impact to cover him completely in a white powder, and he let out a strained cry as he began itching frantically all over his body. Meanwhile, Iruka was speaking with a student in the front row, oblivious to his assistant's suffering as Mizuki continued to itch all over frantically in vain and slumped to the floor with increasingly frustrated grunts. Iruka, having finished speaking, then turned and moved toward his desk in the corner. Naruto had to hold in a chuckle as he made a discreet signal. On that cue, a meow was heard from an open windowsill next to the desk. All students glanced over at the source to see a mischievous-looking black cat on the sill meowing and rubbing against the window frame as it seemed to be presenting itself as a tempting target for a certain animal. Any observant person, like Shikamaru, would note its deep blue eyes and suspicious-looking white marks shaped like a certain blonde's whiskers adorning its cheeks. The temptation worked as barking and growling were heard from Kiba's dog, Akamaru. Before the Inuzuka heir could restrain his partner, The dog suddenly leapt off his companion's head and ran in a straight line toward the open window, barking and growling all the way. The black cat meowed mockingly one last time before disappearing outside. As the Nikin was making his way across the classroom, he scrambled across Mizuki's body before doing a chakra-powered leap right off the poor assistant's crotch, making him cry out sharply and whimper in a new world of pain, having successfully forgotten about the itching in favor of this new hell. In the air, the puppy's flight trajectory would have intersected with Irika's head as he continued on his path to the desk. All the students tensed up as it seemed a collision was imminent. Ah, such a nasty crick in my neck. I'll have to see a medic about this soon. The scarred man grumbled as he exaggeratedly stretched his neck to the side, allowing Akamaru to sail through the air unimpeded right out the window. Oi, you bastard! I'll get you back for this later. Kiba growled over his shoulder at a certain blonde as he followed Akamaru out the window while Irika moved around the desk to sit down. A smirk grew on Naruto's face as he twitched his index finger to launch the last trap he set up. This released 3 hidden spring-loaded traps, shooting out a blunt-edged shuriken each. All 3 shuriken flew from different angles toward the oblivious-looking instructor as he sat down fully. Irika then let out a yawn, his left arm stretching upward before blurring in different directions for half a second before going back to its original outstretched position, this time holding the 3 shuriken deftly between his fingers. He pretended to blink in surprise before bringing his hand down to inspect the shuriken. Oh? How did these get into my hand? He innocently mumbled as the entire class, except the still smirking Naruto, watched in stunned silence. His hand then blurred for an instant, and it was empty. Whoops. It slipped. He said in monotone as the 3 shuriken embedded themselves loudly into the front wooden panel of a desk sitting a row up and directly behind Naruto, framing the unflinching blonde's head. Most of the classes let out a gasp of surprise. Meanwhile, Hinata was about to unleash her patented glare upon Irika for daring to risk hurting Naruto before the blonde put a hand on her shoulder to distract her. She glanced over to see him, also restraining a visibly irritated Ino from speaking up, likely with choice obscenities for the scarred man. No worries. It was just an accident. Right, Irika-sensei? Naruto calmly spoke with that knowing smirk, while Hinata blushed slightly at the expression and the sensation of his strong and warm hand on her shoulder. She didn't notice Ino doing the same. Irika smirked and gave a jerk of his head in a lazy nod. Inside his head was a different story, however. That kid didn't even flinch. I held back, but an academy student should have turned into a whimpering heap at such a close call. He must have gotten some training. Oh well, I'll think about that later. Okay, quiet. Time to get started for the day. He called out to the class, ignoring the trembling and groaning heap of Mizuki next to his desk. Meanwhile, Naruto was deep in his own thoughts as well. Thank Kami I got that hellish training from Enko-chan. I would have turned into a whimpering heap otherwise. That won't do for the container of the great Kyubi no Kitsune. Anyway, I suppose you're about to go all out on this scarred man since he passed your test with flying colors? Kurama spoke from inside her seal with a snicker. Yup. I think this'll be a fun year. The stuff I put up were child's play that I wouldn't be caught dead using otherwise. Time to bring out my big guns and see how he likes it. A cold shiver went through Irika's body as if he just had the hand of Shinigami pass through him. He had a feeling he should have swallowed his pride and took a couple of hits. He then shook it off. Later one morning in Naruto's apartment, Naruto woke up and stretched with a loud yawn in his bed. Morning sunlight was shining through the bedroom's window with a pleasant warmth. Smacking his lips, he slid out and slipped into the bathroom for a quick shower before getting dressed in casual clothes. He then made himself a breakfast of oatmeal and toast. After eating it all, he let out a contented sigh. It's such a nice day to be off from class, he murmured out loud. He then smiled as he heard his tenant's surprised snort. Why? Huh? Why the hell did you wake me up? I was having a pleasant dream chasing after rabbits my size. Kurama grumbled. I thought that was the case when you fell asleep before I left the mindscape last night. Your legs were twitching as if you were running. He thought with an amused smirk upon remembering such a cute sight. Fuck you. I'm not a dog, damn it. The demon fox growled as she stretched and let out a loud earth-shaking yawn. Anyway, so what's on the agenda for today? You do recall I asked you to stop training for the day. You've earned some rest. I suppose I'll terrorize the population like usual. Naruto could feel the fox grinning sinisterly at that statement. He then got up to go back into the bedroom and stood in front of a full-length mirror. He then put up a half-ram hand sign and concentrated before his body was completely enveloped in smoke. What Kurama saw in the mirror when it cleared away made her smirk excitedly. "I happen to know who's out of the village for the day," Naruto announced out loud in his new disguise's voice. Next day at Iruka's apartment, Yumino Iruka stretched out his arms and legs after he just stepped out of his small apartment. He groaned as he still felt somewhat sluggish, since he had returned late last night from an abrupt one-day mission to a nearby village. Grumbling at the fact that he still got missions despite being a full-time sensei at the academy, he made his way out of the apartment building. He then decided to take a leisurely stroll through the streets of Konoha before stopping at the Hokage's office to drop off the mission report on the way to class. As he turned a corner, he accidentally bumped into a woman and instinctively reached an arm out around her waist to steady her. "I'm so sorry. I wasn't watching where I was going, ma'am. Are you all right?" He tried to keep calm as he awaited any reply. The woman, who had her hands on the man's chest, glanced up at his face, and he was surprised to see it was Haruno Saki, mother of one of his students, Sakura. The woman's shoulder-length pink hair tied up into a short ponytail, and her sharp emerald eyes were dead giveaways. To add to her incredible beauty, she was dressed in a tight white blouse with a red floral pattern of sakura petals that showed the curves of her shapely B-cup breasts and flat stomach. To finish her outfit off, she wore a loose white skirt that went midway down to her knees, showing off her long and unblemished legs with a cute pair of white casual sandals adorning her small feet. Iruka had to fight down a blush standing so close to such a desirable woman. "It's quite alright, Dash." Saki's eyes widened upon recognizing Iruka. "Iruka-sensei, it's you! I was hoping to find you after yesterday," she finished in a warm and friendly manner. Iruka swore she seemed to be almost pressing her amazing body up against him. "Yesterday? Haruno-san, I'm afraid I dash," he tried to explain. "Nonsense! You don't have to apologize. I'll admit the way you came up to me, held my hands so softly, and talked sweet nothings to me was surprising at first. You even dipped me in front of everyone in the middle of the street, and whispered some naughty stuff into my ear before disappearing." Saki blushed on the last statement as she remembered what was said to her. Iruka was so bewildered by her story that he almost didn't notice the pink-haired woman press her moderate but shapely breasts tightly into his chunin vest as she continued. "However, you made a widow like me feel something I haven't felt in years, and that's to be wanted." She spoke in a somewhat breathy voice with a mischievous twinkle in her half-lidded eyes. She slowly slid her hands still on his chest up to wrap her arms around Iruka's neck. She then gently pulled the stunned man in close to leave 3 butterfly kisses along the scarred man's jawline, making him shiver pleasantly. She then slowly let go of the blushing man, although she seemed reluctant to do it. "I have to get to work. I hope we'll meet soon and discuss my daughter's progress in your class, among other things." She whispered the last word in a husky tone as she trailed a fingertip along the man's recently kissed jawline before almost skipping off. She then disappeared around another corner with a flirty wave. Iruka stood still, completely frozen, for about 5 minutes before he seemed to reboot. "What just happened?" he muttered to no one in particular, as he found himself alone on this empty street. He raised a hand to rub gently alongside his jawline, and another blush adorned his cheeks. He wondered if she mistook him for someone else before his lips then broke into a small smile. "Whatever will happen, I'll explain myself next time we meet. Though I wouldn't mind seeing her again in a more personal setting. I've always thought of her as a beautiful but quiet woman, but for her to be like that." Iruka trailed off as a somewhat perverted grin crept its way onto his face before he continued walking, shaking off the recent development for another time. Soon in the Hokage's office, Iruka knocked on the office's door. After hearing enter, he opened the door and stepped in only to stop abruptly in his tracks at the odd look the Hokage was giving him, but shook it off and moved up to the large desk. "Chunin Yumino Iruka reporting mission complete, Hokage-sama," he announced as he laid a scroll on the flat surface in front of the still suspicious-looking Hokage. "Wait. Iruka-kun, you weren't here yesterday?" the old man inquired carefully. Iruka narrowed his eyes in confusion. "Forgive me, Hokage-sama, but you must have been misinformed. I was out all day yesterday on this mission that you assigned me," he explained, indicating the scroll on the desk with his hand. "It's just that dash." The third sputtered before realization dawned upon him. He then quickly schooled his features. "Thank you for your hard work and forgive me for the confusion. You may go," he finished with a nod. Iruka thought about pressing for an explanation but decided against it, and left the office. The wizened village leader leaned back in his chair with an annoyed sigh. That solves everything, he muttered to no one in particular. It was Naruto-san yesterday, wasn't it? Yugao's voice called out as she shimmered out of thin air on the office's couch. I believe so, Nico-san. I have to admit I thought I was going senile when Irika-kun walked into the office, stared me in the eyes for 5 minutes without speaking a single word, and then began dancing around like a chicken while screaming unintelligibly. He then dived headfirst out the window. The third tiredly said as he indicated the specific window with a hand. I waited with bated breath for 10 minutes to hear any report of an unfortunate suicide before I decided it was a hallucination. The cap-masked woman had to stifle a chuckle as she remembered the strange incident, before she thought of something. That wasn't a regular henge he was using. All of us would have seen through the genjutsu right away. Instead, he was really transformed into Yumino-san with all of his physical characteristics. Something tells me his tenant had something to do with that. It would have been an amazing spying tool, and that was probably why he didn't tell us about that particular effect of his henge. He knew he would have been forced to train only for spying and then sent out, never to set a foot in this village for years. The civilians would have been heartbroken to have to volunteer such a young and sweet boy for such a long and dangerous mission away from here. Yugao muttered sarcastically, alluding to the fact the civilians could have signed their favorite orphan ward up for the spying program without his consent. If the Hokage refused, they would have gone to the daimyo and presented this as evidence that he was playing favorites and not utilizing someone's full potential to protect the village, likely overriding him while damaging his credibility. Not to mention the fact that the ANBU have discovered a disturbing pattern of many of our agents dying suddenly under odd circumstances after several years of spying. It's as if someone didn't want the veteran spies who've accumulated years of damaging information about Konoha to live any longer. Naruto-san might have been in danger of that. She added with a serious tone. I agree there's a good chance of that happening. That's why you, Boar-san, Lion-san, and I are going to conveniently forget the past 5 minutes. The third said nonchalantly, but there was an edge of authority in his tone. Yugao and the other two hidden ANB replied with a loud yes, Hokage-sama. On that note, it's time to do some pest control. We've allowed an annoying fly to listen to what we wanted it to hear long enough. This recent information cannot get back to that man. The Hokage said darkly as he released a concentrated blast of his killing intent at a certain spot in the office before his right arm blurred for an instant. There was a muffled thud, then a crash behind Yugao. The still-seated ANBU casually turned her head to see an oddly dressed female ANBU lying in a broken heap among some rubbish in the back corner of the office. The hidden woman apparently fell through the ceiling tiles from above upon being killed. Dark blood was pooling underneath from a kunai embedded up to the handle in her forehead. Her featureless mask had shattered from the kunai to reveal a frozen expression of terror on the young dark-haired woman's face. A large piece of the mask displayed a kanji for the word root. I thought root agents were trained to have no emotions. She certainly looked very frightened upon being found out. Yugao commented offhandedly as she gestured for one of her colleagues to radio for a clean-up squad. Hiruzen let out a sigh. That idiot ex-teammate of mine is convinced his little private force can successfully infiltrate the main force full of the most talented shinobi I have the honor of commanding. If he keeps this up, not even his political influence with the daimyo court will protect him, and I will personally eliminate him, evidence or not. He could feel smirks forming on his subordinates' faces under the masks. Is there something you'd like to say? He inquired with some amusement. I think I speak for all of us that we were just reminded you're still a full-blooded shinobi instead of a kindly grandfather figure a certain blonde and most villagers view you as, Hokage-sama. Yugao replied with a small bow of respect. The best shinobi in the village do get the big hat, after all. Hiruzen said dismissively with a smirk before continuing. Anyway, enough of this gloomy subject. I hope Irika-kun finds out he's been impersonated soon. The female ANBU let out a snort. I'm afraid Yumino-sen will run into trouble on the way to the academy, she explained upon seeing her superior's inquisitive eyebrow, before continuing. A friend came over last night to chat because she was angry and wanted to vent. Apparently, Naruto-sen did something to upset a large group of people yesterday afternoon, and word of it got back to her. She's out for blood this morning, and poor Yumino-san is probably walking right into her this very moment. The third and the other ANBU winced in sympathy for the Chunin instructor. Meanwhile, outside between the Hokage Tower and the academy, Irika was walking leisurely toward the nearby academy building with the tower behind him. He pushed aside the confusion in the Hokage's office for the moment, and thought a bit more about his encounter with Saki earlier. He let a stupid grin form on his lips as he remembered how she gently kissed along his jawline. He was so deep in his thoughts that he nearly jumped out of his skin when a female voice called out, and it was laced with restrained anger. Yumino-san, I suppose that perverted grin was because you were thinking back to how you traumatized those people yesterday. Irika spun around to stand face to face with an extremely displeased-looking Yuhi Kurenai. Yuhi-san! What are you talking about? I was dash. He sputtered before a sharp glare interrupted him. Save your excuses! How could you, an upstanding sensei to impressionable children, walk through the streets of this village while loudly reciting passages from those cursed orange books? Those streets were filled with young women and men who are now traumatized by Jiraiya's vile creations. The red-eyed Kunoichi snarled. WHWH what? That's impossible. I wasn't even he dash. Irika tried to calmly explain, but Kurenai wouldn't listen as she blurred through hand signs. This is my best anti-pervert illusion. Enjoy your 30-minute show of Guy and Kakashi making out with each other. His eyes widened in horror as the illusion took hold before he began to scream and fell to the ground twitching with one last coherent thought. It was that blonde bastard. I just know he had something to do with my day going to hell. As he continued to scream and twitch on the ground while Kurenai stomped off, the aforementioned blonde bastard and his indigo-haired friend were standing on the roof of the academy overlooking what just happened between the two adults. Ano, was what Yuhi-san said true? Hinata asked apprehensively of Naruto, who was looking pityingly down at the still screaming Irika. It's not true. She let relief begin to fill her before it was shattered the next instant. After all, on my way here this morning, I saw most of the people that heard me reciting one of Erosenen's books walking out of a bookstore, and they were carrying copies of the same orange book with blushes on their cheeks. They certainly didn't look traumatized to me like Kurenai-san claimed. Naruto cheerfully said with a foxy grin before being bopped on the head by a glaring Hinata. Avoiding the glare, he jumped down to Irika with his fuming friend following suit. He knelt down next to his sensei's twitching body and pushed the man's hataite up out of the way to rest a palm on his forehead. Mind helping me dispel the genjutsu, please? Of course I don't mind. Forcing someone to see the scarecrow and the green idiot tongue wrestling is an evil I wouldn't wish on anyone but any Uchiha. Kurama shuddered briefly before forcing a small pulse of her chakra through her container's system, which in turn pulsed his own chakra through his hand into Irika. This was a quicker and more effective method than having to spend a long moment gathering chakra within himself to release it quite forcefully, no thanks to his less than stellar chakra control. This method was enough to disrupt the sensei's chakra pathways for an instant, shattering the horrible illusion of a naked Kakashi and Guy about to decide who was going to be the bottom. He calmed down right away with a sigh of relief, but still out of it for the moment. Sorry, Irika-sensei. I didn't think Kurenai-san would overreact like that. Naruto murmured before standing up. Hinata-chan, let's go inside. He'll be up in a few minutes, so we might as well wait for class to start. He walked into the building with his friend, leaving behind a relieved Irika dreaming of a certain pink-haired woman to wash away the horrific illusion he just experienced. Later that night, in a hidden base somewhere under Konoha, an oddly dressed ANBU appeared out of thin air, kneeling in front of a heavily bandaged black-haired old man bundled up in a large haori that seemed to be missing his right arm and eye. One of his most distinguishing characteristics beside these was the prominent cross-shaped scar on his chin. They were alone in a barren office that the old man was occupying for the time being. Report. Shimura Danzo commanded in a cold voice. Danzo-sama, Agent 052 is dead. The kneeling root agent reported with no hint of emotion in his voice. The only display of emotion his master showed was a slight twitch of his visible eye. How did it happen? The Hokage terminated her while she was conducting her surveillance in his office. From what I gathered, he did not even bother trying to capture her or give her any chance to surrender. Danzo couldn't control a slight intake of his breath at hearing the circumstances. His lone hand resting on the desk unwittingly clenched into a tight fist for a brief moment. If that's all, you may go. The agent vanished from his sight with no further acknowledgement of his dismissal. Now alone in his office, he let out a small growl of frustration. That accursed monkey! For how long did he know my agent was there? She was the best in stealth out of us, and yet he found her anyway. How much of the information that he allowed to pass through her was for his own benefit, and not mine? To hear he mercilessly terminated her without even bothering to try to capture her alive. Danzo felt a small shiver as he was reminded of his ex-teammate's younger, and far more ruthless, self. Yes, I will have to be more careful from now on. He mused to himself as his attention went back to some paperwork on his desk. Even the leader of a secret organization had paperwork to deal with as well. Later, a random alley in Konoha, Naruto was speeding through an alley while laughing like a child. He glanced behind himself to see a squad of 5 ANBU sprinting along the walls and ground as they tried to keep up with the quick blonde. You might as well give up. Aren't those masks getting a little snug? He called out over his shoulder with an infuriating smirk at the enraged ANBU. You bastard! Putting super glue on the inside of our masks is unforgivable. We'll get you this time. One member of the squad growled as they pushed themselves hard to catch up with him as they continued to speed through alleyways and buildings. After a long chase throughout most of the village that included failed ambushes and traps, it looked like Naruto was going to get away unscathed as his superior acrobatics and stamina once again won over the ANBU. Just as he was about to lose them with a huge victorious smile on his face, he was stopped cold in his track because of an arm sticking out of nowhere to pull a harsh clothesline on him. The blonde let out a choking sound as he swung forward and back once from his neck before the arm wrapped around his head into a tight headlock. A familiar voice jolted him out of his daze. Why the hell are you causing trouble for the nice ANBU, Naruto? Iruka-sensei! Ow! Naruto yelped as his sensei's arm tightened even more and was conked on the top of his head with the other hand. The ANBU that were chasing Naruto came to a full stop, staring at the scene in surprise. Apologize right now for the trouble you caused them. Iruka growled as he dug his knuckles in painfully. Oh, wow. Okay. Stop that. I'll apologize. I'm really sorry, nice ANBU people. Naruto yelled out as he struggled to get away from the noogie he was retrieving. The ANBU continued to watch this scene in silence as the scarred man released their blonde nemesis. That'll do. As punishment, I'm making you clean the classroom today. No argument. Iruka said sternly before Naruto could complain. The sensei then sent the grumbling blonde on the way to the academy. He then smiled nervously as he turned toward the ANBU squad and bowed. I apologize for my students' behavior. You should go see a medic Nin for help in removing your masks. Good luck, he calmly said before he also walked off toward the academy. After a long moment of silence, one of the ANBU turned to the others. So, am I alone in feeling like an asshat after watching one normal Chunin manhandle that blonde bastard as if it was nothing? The others shook their heads, and they all sighed in dejection before heading off to find ways to remove their masks. Later one day at the dango shop, Kurama, I've been thinking. Naruto lazily thought as he was people-watching from his seat at a patio table outside the dango shop. He took a stick of dango into his mouth to begin munching on each ball. Better be careful with that. We wouldn't want you to burn the few brain cells you have in your skull. Kurama retorted with a snicker. He allowed an annoyed tick on his temple before ignoring the insult. I've been watching these people for a while and now, as much as I hate to say this, I think Erosenin is right. Oh my Kami! The great Uzumaki Naruto admitted another person is right. And it's the old pervert of all people. Kurama exclaimed in mock shock before laughing. You're annoying, damn fox. Anyway, I've noticed most men in the crowd always seem to stare at the most attractive women in the vicinity at the moment, despite the fact that some of them were with their girlfriends or wives. Naruto replied with a smirk at remembering seeing the unfaithful men getting into trouble when their women caught them red-handed. So you're admitting that old pervert was right when he said that most of the men are perverts, openly or not? I could have told you that a long time ago from my thousands of years observing humans. You're one of them too. I'm not. Naruto tried to defend himself before his face exploded into a bright shade of red upon seeing an image pushed into his mind by Kurama. Oh really, my oh so pure and innocent container? So who was the one who's been asking to see my highly detailed memory of a certain wet and naked purple-haired beauty every other week? Kurama retorted with a victorious and toothy grin, knowing she caught Naruto. Naruto sighed and conceded that point. I won't be open about it like Erosenin is, at least. Anyway, what do you think of me coming up with an anti-pervert jutsu? Something like Kurenai-san's scary genjutsu, only with the solid henge in my case. That may actually work in many cases. Unless a man trains himself extensively to be resistant to a woman's charm, he would be surprised if you spring something like this on him suddenly and a split-second distraction could make a difference. Others will call this a moronic jutsu, but this will be useful in some cases such as infiltration and seduction, if you ever have to go down that path. I hope not. No matter what, I'm not going to let any guy get anywhere close to kissing me, let alone go beyond that. Anyway, looks like I'll be spending today figuring out the perfect body for this then. I'll need reference materials. Naruto concluded as he paid his bill and jumped up to the rooftops. Making his way to a nearby bookstore, he then hinged into a plain-looking adult civilian before jumping down to the ground. He casually walked into the store and quickly found the adult section. As Naruto grabbed a copy each of all the available volumes in his godfather's Ika Ika series, much to his tenant's delight, he came across some magazines full of what he thought to be attractive women in various poses and different states of undress. As he was making his way to the sales counter, he overheard something that made his blood boil. Yeah, so I hear that snake whore and her hot friend usually go to the drunk kage every Friday. How about we go over to that bar tonight and try get into their panties? I'm sure if we wave a wad of cash around that snake bitch, she'll be too happy to do whatever we want and her hot friend may follow suit. A slimy-looking man leered with his two equally unsavory friends in one of the store's aisles. His eye twitching, the disguised Naruto slowly made his way behind the boasting slime. He then opened one of the magazines in his arms to a rather intriguing picture of a woman posing and then tossed it in the air. The slime's two friends immediately looked up in the air as their eyes hungrily followed the flying porn magazine. The slime, since he was facing them with the magazine flying behind him, was confused at this reaction. While the two men were distracted, Naruto discreetly kicked at the back of the slime's knee. It made the man fall to his knee with a small gasp of surprise while his two friends were still looking up in the air. Naruto then seemed to be innocently walking past the group of men, his stiff arm shoving the kneeling man's head hard sideways into one of the aisle's shelves. The man's forehead conked against the metal shelf loudly before he sank to the floor, unconscious for a long while to come. This all happened so fast, and when the man's two friends returned their attention to their friend at the sudden noise, they thought he just fell and hit his head. They went to his side, forgetting about the disguised boy that seemed to be nonchalantly walking by. That'll teach that asshole. You do realize that if they were stupid enough to actually try hitting on those two females, they will suffer a fate worse than death itself? I know. Still wouldn't stop me from wanting to defend my friend's honor, and I at least made sure the pretty ladies will have one less group of men bothering them tonight. Naruto explained as he made his way to the sales counter to pay for his reference materials. A disgusted glare from the female sale clerk didn't bother him as he left the store. Later in the afternoon at his apartment. All right. I've looked through them all, Naruto declared with a huge blush on his cheeks as he sat cross-legged on the living room floor, the porn magazines he purchased lying open around him. So have you figured out the best physique for your new henge? I'm not so sure. There are a lot of different features I liked when I looked through the magazines. I like small breasts as much as I do large ones. I like slender as much as I do curves. It's hard to pick between them all. It'll take me a long while to find the perfect body that most men would pass out upon seeing it. Why not create some clones and have them pick their own favorites, and they parade around in their new looks for your judging? Just separate them so they study their magazines on their own and make sure they don't discuss anything with each other. It's worth a try, Naruto decided with a shrug as he stood up to activate his apartment-wide privacy seal. His use of chakra would attract unnecessary attention, and he didn't want to have to explain why he had porn magazines lying around his apartment. Putting his hands into a familiar cross-shaped hand seal, he created 10 clones. All right, minions! Each of you grab a magazine and split up. Do not discuss anything with each other and decide on your own which features make the best body overall. Line up here in 30 minutes and we'll get the show started. He barked and the clones let out a yell of Asu before they picked out their magazines. Naruto then went into the kitchen to cook himself a quick dinner, while his clones scrambled to their own studying spots. 30 minutes later, Naruto put his empty plate into the sink and returned to the living room to find all 10 of his clones lined up. Each of you got an image in your head? Naruto inquired, and they all replied with an affirmative. Go ahead and transform. All 10 clones put their right hands up in a half-rem seal, and smoke then enveloped all of them. After it cleared away, Naruto suddenly sported a huge blush and had to work to keep from getting a nosebleed. Standing before him were 10 of the most attractive naked women he ever saw so far. Even Enko and Yuga would be jealous. Phew, even I feel a little hot under my fur seeing them. Naruto raised an eyebrow upon the demon fox's admission, and it was clear the clones somehow heard her compliment because they all blushed. He put the new discovery of Kurama being able to communicate mentally with his clones aside for the moment. That's odd coming from you, considering you're a fox, and I might as well just throw in the fact you said you're female on more than one occasion. He deadpanned. Whatever my nature and gender are, assuming I do not appreciate beauty in any form would be wrong, and those 10 are certainly right up there in the beauty department. If there's one thing I would ever say truthfully about you, it's that you have an excellent taste in human women. Naruto thought for a moment before shrugging lazily. This is probably not going to be the strangest thing I would ever hear you say in all of our life together, so I'm just going to roll with this. Naruto concluded before turning a critical eye toward the 10 naked and blushing female clones. He noticed with some amusement that the women, despite being clones of him on the inside, were acting more like bashful maidens the longer they remained naked under his scrutiny. Meanwhile, the clone's general thought process was taking an interesting turn. I hope he picks me since I spent a lot of time thinking on my looks. However, I wonder why I'm suddenly feeling a little uncomfortable having boss looking over us so closely. Is this how all females felt when men were checking them out in public? I think something's wrong with me for thinking this way, but I can't help it. Ugh, I'm not liking being naked around a male now. Upon looking closely at the clones, Naruto discovered a few similarities between some of them. 7 of them were sporting his blonde hair color in various styles. He particularly liked the hair color for his henge, so he announced at the start that he would be eliminating the 3 clones that weren't blonde, 2 brunettes, and 1 black-haired. What? It's clear those 3 are beautiful. How could boss toss them aside without a second thought? They spent a lot of time on trying to impress the boss, and he just decides he wanted only blonde hair? Typical man, focusing only on 1 or 2 features instead of the whole picture. I'm going to let boss have it if he keeps this up. Was the current thought process of the female-looking clones now glaring at their creator disapprovingly? Naruto immediately noticed a disturbing pattern developing in the 3 cloned girls being genuinely upset at being eliminated so quickly, and the other 7 clones were looking at him with some annoyance, apparently for being harsh toward their non-blonde companions. It looks like they're taking on more feminine traits, such as a female group's tendency to protect all of their comrades. Are they actually turning into girls on the inside instead of just the exterior? Naruto thought, hoping for an answer from his tenant. That seems to be the case, considering the thoughts I'm hearing from these clones. And I do think you're being a little harsh by cutting these 3 so quickly just because of hair color. They work so hard coming up with their looks to please their creator, after all. You're joining their side too. Why shouldn't I? I'm female too. You certainly picked the perfect time to actually act like a girl after all this time. I'm going to get this over with before this whole thing become even more fucked up. Naruto muttered mentally as he looked at the 7 remaining girls. He noticed the 3 eliminated girls standing off to the side with dejected expressions. Damn it, even he was feeling a little bad about that. Next, he noticed 4 of them displayed some youth in their features compared to the more mature features of the other 3. He thought the somewhat innocent beauty would appeal to a lot of men, himself included. Based on that, he eliminated another 3 clones. Once again, he dealt with the disappointment of the 3 girls he cut as the other 7 clones not only became more annoyed, but also got vocal in defending their female companions. He had to deal with some grumblings from the peanut gallery on the side, and in his head too with the demon fox putting in her own opinion too. He was sorely tempted to dispel all of them this minute, but he wanted to complete this version of his henge. He found 1 clone's curly and naturally tousled shoulder-length hair to be interesting. Another clone's short bob was something he didn't think of either. However, he decided he wanted long hair for his henge, so he cut the short-haired pair, despite the other clones and foxes growing discontent. Apparently they believed the curly-haired clone to be the most beautiful of the group, even the ones that remained in the running. Ignoring the revolting clones and fox, he checked out the last 2 clones closely. One had silky and straight hair done up in twin pigtails, and the second had long, alluring, and radiant waist-length curly hair. He liked both of the styles equally, and their faces looked almost identical down to the whisker marks, so he looked at their bodies closely. The curly-haired clone was petite at 5 feet with a slender frame that had shapely teardrop-shaped B-cup breasts that did not seem small at all in proportion to the rest of the body. Light pink areola and nipples adorned the impressive breasts. He also noted the somewhat wide hips as they stood out due to the clone's slender shape. Turning to the twin pigtailed clone, he felt the clone's body look somewhat familiar. It was taller than the other clone by 6 inches and carried more mass than the other clone's slender body with well-toned muscles all over and wide hips. The butt was well-rounded and plump, looking like a very tempting place to smack. The legs were long and shapely. The C-cup breasts, bordering on D, were very perky with small dark red nipples, and they looked to be a perfect fit for the clone's larger body. He then came to realize that this clone used the image of Anko's incredible body from that day in the hot spring. The clone apparently took that and, because Naruto did not catch the sight of Anko's front that day, added what it believed to be the perfect pair of breasts to Anko's amazing body and recreated it in its own image. Naruto always did find Anko extremely attractive, and he enjoyed her unique personality. Feeling a connection to the purple-haired woman in this clone's image, despite its own modification of using a darker tan, long blonde hair done up in twin pigtails, and more softer facial features, he made his decision. Meanwhile, the fuming clone's general thought process was focused solely on branding Naruto as a male chauvinist pig, and daring him to be a typical male and pick the one with the bigger breasts. The fox, having understood Naruto's thought process for what it really was, decided to give him a break. It didn't mean she would stop teasing her container, since she was going to let the clones draw their own misunderstood conclusion about their creator and play along. Letting out a sigh, knowing what would come when he made his choice, Naruto pointed at the twin pigtailed clone. "Alright, I'll go with this one." "Of course you would pick the one with the big breasts." The clones, including the winner, and the fox chorused in perfect harmony. "Whatever you want to think. I can't believe I'm having my own clones act like real girls and turning against me over this. Not to mention you suddenly becoming girly, Kurama. This has been a really weird evening," the only male in the apartment muttered. "Now that it's over with, I'm gonna get rid of you and I'm going to forget about this whole damn thing." He was preparing to dispel the clones when he heard knocking at the front door. Forgetting about the current situation for the moment, he walked over and pulled the door open to reveal Yumino Irika. "Hello, Naruto. I thought I'd make a quick stop here and see how you're doing with your home life. Can I come in?" The sensei greeted with a wave. Naruto suddenly had a nagging feeling he forgot something very important just a moment ago, but shook it off. Kurama smacked her forehead but silently snickered as she sat back to watch the shit about to hit the fan. "Sure. Come on in, Irika-sensei. Please have a seat in the living room," Naruto replied as he stepped back to let his sensei into his apartment. As soon as Irika entered the living room, his eyes bulged out upon seeing 10 very gorgeous and naked women standing in the living room. Naruto smacked his forehead with a groan for his short-term memory failure. The clones then realized there was another man in the apartment, and they did what any self-respecting male clone transformed into a naked woman would do. They screamed in the most girly way possible. "KYA!" All 10 clones screamed cutely as they tried their best to run around and cover up their privates with their arms. For any observer, it would have been a very adorable and arousing scene to view. That was what Irika, and Naruto to a lesser degree, felt as they watched 10 young women scramble and falling over themselves for cover. In the next instant, Irika was blown backward from a massive nosebleed and he crashed into a wall behind him before sliding down to the floor completely unconscious, a perverted grin plastered on his face. Naruto wiped a small nosebleed from under his nose before he turned to the unconscious body. "Are you alive? On a side note, my new Oiroke no Jutsu works awesome," he exclaimed with a fist raised in victory. The celebration was short-lived as he stopped cold when he felt a massive wave of killing intent from behind. Slowly turning his head around to see 10 very pissed-off clones looking ready to murder him, he let out a small whimper. "You bastard! How dare you expose us innocent maidens to a stranger without our permission? We'll teach you a lesson!" The twin pigtailed winner of the contest growled as all 10 clones cracked their knuckles. They then descended upon their creator to unleash their righteous feminine rage upon him. As Naruto was being pounded into the floor with punches and stomps aimed at his very sensitive spots, he had one last thought before unconsciousness took him. So this is how Erosenin feels whenever he's caught peeping. I always knew he was a masochist. Also, this is the weirdest fucking day I've ever had all my life, bar none. Next morning, Naruto let out a groan as he slowly raised himself to a sitting position on the floor of his living room. "Ow, feels like I've been beaten up by 10 women. Oh yeah, that did happen," Naruto grumbled as he looked around the room. His clones apparently dispelled themselves long ago as he now processed their memories. He let out a shudder when he went over some of the very female thought processes of the clones. Note to self: do not transform into a girl any longer than necessary. He was surprised to hear a groan from behind. He looked around to see Irika still propped up against the hallway wall, and he was rousing himself out of his nosebleed-induced unconsciousness. Smacking his lips, he glanced around until his tired eyes locked with a pair of deep blue eyes. Hi, Naruto nervously said as he worried about what his sensei would say about last night. He wondered if he would have to reveal the fact that he already knew a very advanced and forbidden variation of the Bunshin at the very least. Naruto? What happened last night? All I remember is coming inside and then I think something knocked me out. Iruka groggily asked as he shook out some cobwebs in his head. It was a prank that sprang itself without my permission and it went wrong. It knocked me out too. I'm really sorry, Iruka-sensei, Naruto carefully said, hoping to avoid any mention of his clones or the fact that they were naked women. He tensed up a little as he watched the scarred man concentrate hard as he seemed to be trying to remember everything about last night. He then gave up and shook his head. That's all right. I came here to check on you and it looks like you were just up to your usual stunts. I should get going and leave you alone for the day. See you tomorrow in class, Naruto, Iruka assured with a kind smile as he stood up to leave. Naruto escorted him out before he closed the front door and leaned his forehead against it with a sigh of relief. Selective memory loss? I would assume so. Imagine how likely a virgin like him would feel when he walks into the residence of an 13-year-old and sees 10 very beautiful and naked women standing in the living room. Naruto did an exaggerated that makes sense shrug before going into the kitchen to make his breakfast. Some days later. Oi Gaki! A female voice stopped Naruto in his track while he was walking down a street with bags of groceries for dinner tonight. He turned his head over his shoulder to see Mitarashi Anko jogging up with a waving hand. He had to turn his head to hide a blush as he remembered that his new Oiro Kenji was based off this beautiful purple-haired woman's curvaceous body. He couldn't help but keep superimposing the image of that hinged body right over Anko's actual one. Her somewhat scandalous outfit didn't help matters either. The woman blinked in confusion when she got close enough to catch him blushing. What's wrong, Gaki? Your face is red. Panicking, he almost dropped his bags when his arms flailed for a few seconds before calming down enough to reply. It's nothing. It's been a warm day, that's all. Anko frowned in suspicion as she watched the blonde keep glancing away in obvious embarrassment, but shook it off. She then displayed a huge smile. Guess what? We gotta celebrate tonight. Naruto's confused "huh" was cut off when she shoved an open book in his face. His eyes nearly crossed at such closeness, but he managed to make out a picture of the purple-haired Jonin with some text next to it. It didn't take him long to figure out what he was looking at. Your bingo book entry? I've already seen it. It was B rank last time I checked, he commented with a frown as he moved his head to the side to glance at Anko, but she followed the movement and shoved the book back in his face. Look again, she insisted with a prideful voice. Frowning and grumbling, Naruto did his best to see what he could make of the 2 closed pages. It didn't take him long to see what was different. A rank. Let's see. Assassinated a Land of Earth district governor. Killed or crippled 8 IWA shinobi in the process. 2 of them Jounin dash yeah. That'll get you a 4 sure. 300,000 Ryo, dead or alive. That's pretty high. That fat bastard was kidnapping women from other countries, ours included, for his own sick pleasures. I made sure he and his guards regretted every bit of it. Anko explained with a malicious grin, making the blonde shiver on the inside. Well, congratulations are in order then, he replied with a genuine smile. Only that reaction? You're gonna treat me to dinner tonight to celebrate this, she retorted in a no-nonsense tone. Frowning in confusion, Naruto lifted the bags in his hands to show her. But I've already bought stuff to make dinner tonight. Oh, a homemade dinner! Thank you so much for this. Let's get going! Anko exclaimed happily as she grabbed a feebly protesting Naruto by his collar and dragged him away in the direction of their apartment building. Meanwhile, one young indigo-haired woman standing some distance down the street was burning holes into the back of the purple-haired woman's head with her glare while watching Anko drag her Naruto off as he resigned himself to spending the evening with company. Hinata growled as she watched her plan to run into Naruto and innocently asked to have dinner with him tonight go up in smoke. She knew he usually cooked his own dinner on this day every week, and she found herself running into him once or twice every month in order to taste some of his wonderful cooking. Naruto always said her cooking was better, but there was nothing like getting to eat meals made by the one you loved. Now Anko was going to have that privilege tonight. She growled again and stomped off with the people on the street quickly splitting up to make way for her. They were terrified by the usually gentle Hyuga heiress' frosty glare. Later one day at a public park. And then Naruto-kun? Cece, could you please get away from that TT thing? Hinata stuttered as she stood trembling by herself about 10 meters from Naruto sitting on one of the park benches. Anko was standing behind the bench, bending at the hips over the backrest as she draped an arm loosely around the blonde's shoulders. She was fighting to keep her evil smirk hidden. The reason for Hinata's terror was slithering its way through Naruto's hands. A small purple boa constrictor hissed happily as the blonde scratched under her chin. Why? This snake's harmless and fun to play with, Naruto innocently said as he held the snake up in one hand. Hinata took a fearful step back. Even so. I can't stand being around snakes, she stammered, her trembling pale eyes completely focused on her mortal enemy. Anko smirked mischievously, not being able to resist such a delicious opportunity, and whispered something to her pet. The purple snake gave a nod before springing out of a surprised Naruto's hand and landing a few meters from the stunned Hinata. It then began slithering toward the increasingly trembling and whimpering Hyuga, and it wasn't long before she broke and let out a shrill shriek. She then ran away at full speed with the snake on her heels. Naruto gave Anko an annoyed glare over his shoulder as she stuck a tongue out with a giggle. Hinata's panic yelling continued in the background. Anko-chan! What's your problem with Hinata-chan? I know you sicked the snake on her, he demanded. You'll have to figure that out yourself, Gaki. It should be obvious. Anko teased as she wrapped her arms around his neck from behind and lightly pressed her bountiful breasts up against it. Naruto was stuttering upon feeling something blissfully soft, and she was enjoying teasing him so much she didn't notice the yelling growing louder. Naruto-kyuen! Save me! Hinata shrieked as she ran straight at the pair, jolting them out of their brief skinship. Naruto returned his attention in time to see the indigo-haired girl jump at him. On instinct, he reached out to catch her slender frame as she crashed into him, inadvertently straddling his lap on the bench. Her actions also knocked Anko away as she stumbled backward a few feet with an annoyed growl emitting from her throat. As Naruto began to make sense of everything after the collision, he immediately noticed his vision was blocked, and he felt something soft enveloping his face. He also noticed his hands were grabbing onto something very soft as well. On instinct, they squeezed whatever were in them. He was surprised to hear a soft squeak followed by a moan, and felt some tightening pressure around his head. It was when he finally realized his head was buried in Hinata's chest with her arms wrapped tightly around it, and his hands were squeezing her but. Aren't her breasts a little too big for a 13-year-old? They must be see already. So it isn't enough for our playboy to see 10 naked women the other day, he had to feel one up. Kurama interjected with an amused chuckle. Blushing, Naruto immediately let go of his hold on Hinata's but to try prying her arms from around his head. He thought he heard a low disappointed growl from Hinata when he stopped squeezing her but chalked that up to his imagination. However, she was keeping an iron grip on him as she trembled with adrenaline from being chased. She refused to listen to anything Naruto was trying to say as she tightened her hold on his head, burying him further into her chest. His tiny inner pervert and Kurama were cheering this development. Anko growled again in annoyance as she watched this scene unfold. Most of the time she met up with Naruto anywhere in the village outside their apartment building. Hinata always seemed to be there with him, and she found herself fighting a little with the Hyuga heiress for Naruto's attention. She wasn't sure why she was doing it, but she felt some sense of competition with the younger girl. She was hoping to scare Hinata away this time, but it apparently backfired on her, and she could tell Naruto was somewhat enjoying his unique position with Hinata at this moment. With a sigh, she picked up her pet that slithered cautiously to her feet and gave the purple boa constrictor a slightly stern look. Weren't you supposed to keep her away, my sweetie? She whispered in a half-annoyed and half-amused tone. The snake responded with a sad hiss as she bowed her head in guilt. Anko found this adorable and couldn't keep up her stern act. She smiled and nuzzled her cheek against the snake's head as she walked off calling out her goodbyes, leaving Naruto to suffocate in Hinata's chest. Finally, after a few minutes of Naruto's muffled assurances, Hinata let go of his head, very reluctantly on her part, and he took an intake of breath. Geez, you have such a strong grip when you're terrified, Hinata-chan. He teased good-naturedly with a slight blush on his cheeks since he could still feel the softness of Hinata's developing chest lingering on them. I'm sorry. I know I should be better about snakes since I may encounter enemies using them in the future. Hinata spoke softly as she remained straddling him absent-mindedly. Don't worry about it. I'm sorry about Anko-chan. I wish I could say she's usually not like this, but it's in her nature to tease other people, to be honest. If you want, I can talk to her about leaving you alone when it comes to snakes in the future," Naruto offered. Hinata shook her head immediately. "I need to get used to them, Naruto-kun. I believe Anko-san will be a big help with that if she keeps this up, so please just let her do whatever she wants," she replied with a smile, and then began to blush when she became acutely aware of the fact she was straddling the one she loved. She wanted it to last, so she tried not to call attention to that. Unfortunately for her, Naruto noticed her blush, and he seemed to have finally realized she was on his lap. Stuttering in surprise, he apologized and gently moved her off to sit down next to him on the bench, much to her immense displeasure. He noticed her upset expression as she let out a frustrated sigh, and thought it was because he allowed her to linger too long in an intimate position with him. "Why the hell did you have to break that moment up? It was getting good between you two," Kurama growled in annoyance. Naruto wasn't sure why his tenant was suddenly annoyed with him too. "Enjoying it or not, I can't do that to my best friend. She wouldn't like it." "Are you sure, Naruto? Have you ever stopped to think about what she actually wanted instead of just assuming she wouldn't like this or that? If she wanted anything, she knows she can just tell me. She could, but she understands that it's important you figure this one out for yourself instead of getting the answer from her. She has some amazing patience, because she's been waiting a long time for you to clue yourself in on a fact that everyone else has already seen." Naruto was about to quiz his tenant on what she was talking about when he was cut off. "I'm not going to tell you any more about this, so don't bother asking. I'll give you a hint, however. Think over your relationship with her up until now, and see if there were things you missed. I certainly hope the answer will come to you soon for all of our sake." Thinking over what his tenant said to him, Naruto took a careful glance at Hinata, who was still gazing away in the distance with a subdued expression and slumped shoulders. Going over Kurama's words in his head, he couldn't help but have a lingering feeling that there really was something between him and his friend that he was missing. A few days later, Naruto was whistling lazily as he made his way through the village to the usual training ground for his daily exercise. "Naruto-kun! Gaki!" He was stopped by two female voices calling to him from opposite directions. He glanced down one street to find Hinata walking toward him with a bright smile. Turning the other way, he noted Anko waving with her usual smirk. And that was when they noticed each other. Naruto had to sigh when the two females stopped dead in their tracks and began to glare at each other. He could almost imagine sparks flying between them. "Hey girls. What's up?" he asked tentatively, hoping this wouldn't lead to another competition for his attention like before. After staring at each other for a long moment, Hinata was the first to break off and graced him with a beatific smile. "Naruto-kun, I was wondering if you'd like to come over to our compound and spend some time together. It's been a while since Hanabi-chan last saw you, too." Anko scowled and moved in close. "I was gonna ask you if you'd like to spar with me. Nothing gets the blood flowing like some good old-fashioned slugging match." Naruto was about to retort that it was her who would do all the slugging since he could barely touch her in their spars so far, but Hinata cut that off as she glared at the other woman coolly with the perfect Hyuga composure. "I believe I am the one who asked him first." Anko snorted. "I saw him first. I have known him longer. I'm older, so he has to listen to me. I am his best friend. I'm his sensei. Naruto." Anko and Hinata were almost touching noses and looked like they were about to resort to blows when a loud bellow shocked them out of their argument. They glanced around carefully for any possible threat until they saw how Naruto was paling rapidly. In the next instant, a scarred man blurred into existence next to the blonde. "Iruka-sensei!" Naruto stammered as he tried to escape, only to nearly choke himself when Iruka snatched the back of his collar to keep him from running off. "I finally found you, and don't think I'm letting you off this time. You scared 50 years from my lifespan when you somehow snuck that realistic tiger statue into my bedroom this morning. I certainly had a nice wake-up call when I thought a big cat was going to pounce on me in my own bed," he growled as he hoisted the flailing blonde up. "Hee, you have to admit that was a great idea." Naruto shot back with unapologetic pride before being conked on the head by Iruka's free hand. "Not for me. As punishment, you're helping me grade all of my class's schoolwork." "What? That'll take all day. Should have thought of that before doing that prank. Now, march!" Iruka ordered as he practically frog-marched Naruto out of sight, leaving two totally ignored women behind. They both blinked for a long moment, before frowning and snapping their gazes to each other. After staring at each other for a long moment. "So, now that the Gaki's been kidnapped, I guess it's truce between us?" Enko was the one to break the silence. Hinata nodded. I agree. Have a pleasant day, she replied neutrally. Same to ya. Don't be a stranger. They nodded to each other once more and stalked off in opposite directions. One day at the academy. The lesson's over. You're all dismissed, Iruka announced authoritatively as all the students in his classroom cheered upon being released for the day. They all filtered out, some out the door and others out the windows. Iruka was watching all of this unfold, his eyes lingering on Naruto with some suspicion. He was feeling a little antsy as there hadn't been a new prank from his blonde student in days, and it was grating on his nerves as he wondered when he was going to strike. As he watched Naruto walk out of the classroom with Hinata and Ino laughing about something, he noticed something on Naruto's desk. Curious, he walked over to the desk to find a folded piece of paper sitting on it, and he realized Naruto must have dropped it. With that thought, he immediately went out into the hallway to look for Naruto, and he was surprised to find the blonde already gone from the academy building within seconds of exiting out the classroom's door. Letting out a sigh, the sensei returned to Naruto's desk and picked up the folded paper to throw it away. He had often said that if there were anything left behind after lessons it would be disposed of, so it was no one but Naruto's fault for not heeding his warnings. Before the sensei was about to drop the paper in the wastebasket, he caught a glimpse of a set of numbers written on the outside. As he stopped in his track and brought the folded paper up to his face to take a closer look, Iruka saw the set of numbers represented a date in the near future. The day after tomorrow, to be more precise. Raising an eyebrow, he pondered over why Naruto would label a piece of paper as such for a future date. After quickly running through all the possibilities in his mind, he eliminated everything but one theory. Naruto was planning a prank in 2 days. Iruka let out a disappointed sigh as his mind settled on that thought. He recently taught a lesson that written information left anywhere, no matter how secure it was dangerous for a shinobi. He taught that it was typically expected of a nin to immediately eliminate any paper trail leading back to him or her. For Naruto to have already forgotten one of the basic rules of being a shinobi, Iruka wasn't able to help but feel disappointed in the blonde for not being on top of his pranking game like usual this time. With that thought, Iruka decided to teach Naruto a lesson by stopping this upcoming prank before it even had a chance of happening. That way, he would teach Naruto not to leave information lying around and also have the satisfaction of stopping one of his pranks, an occasion that was getting too rare for his liking. He then opened the folded piece of paper to read what it contained. Ideas for a new prank. Tnub drek viga lutet sak psyka vun kaki du vet ev white. Dra fy lar residential kbat dra hak tio dragek eugen dra sak psyka yht fnida y ikamak sak psyka ibden drek. Energy kaki ec y bubu rate. So Naruto wasn't that careless after all. This is encoded, and it's at least decent. Iruka observed as he quickly ran through popular ciphers most shinobi used in his mind only to find no match. I'm not going to let this beat me. I'll figure this message out and stop Naruto. With that determination, he folded the paper back up and pocketed it as he moved to close the classroom for the day. He stopped at the library on the way and picked up several books on cryptography to see if he could figure out the type of code his blonde student used. Arriving at his apartment, he quickly set about doing his usual routine for the evening. After dinner and grading his students' schoolwork, he finally decided it was time to work on the encoded message as he took out the folded piece of paper and laid it out on his desk. He then cracked open the first cryptography book he grabbed off the pile of books next to him. Next day it was early in the morning when Iruka let out a frustrated groan as he leaned into his desk chair and pinched the bridge of his nose. He felt a dull headache coming on and his eyes were hurting and tired from so much reading. He allowed a loud yawn. Damn it. I still can't break the code. I can't believe it's already 5 in the morning, and I have to get ready in 2 hours. He rubbed out the tiredness in his eyes and stood up wobbling, feeling a little lightheaded from being up all night. He decided a cold shower would wake him up as he stepped into the bathroom. After getting ready and eating breakfast, he walked toward the academy deep in thought about what Naruto's prank was going to be. Even though he knew the day the prankster would strike, he had no idea of the exact time, how Naruto was going to do it, and where it would happen. Iruka let out another groan as he entered the academy. He knew he was going to be spending all day thinking on this. The next 8 hours of class did nothing to improve Iruka's mood at all. He hated the fact that he was more distracted by Naruto's coded message than he should have been. He turned in a less than adequate teaching job and many of his students grumbled about a wasted day as they didn't learn anything relevant. That was a blow to his pride and his professionalism, and it didn't help he was very exhausted and irritable due to skipping sleep last night. To make all of this worse, Naruto did not even seem worried at all. Surely the blonde must have realized the paper on which he wrote his prank's plan was missing by now. Instead, he just spent the entire class day chattering with his friends and being his regular self. Iruka growled slightly in irritation as he watched Naruto leave with his friends as usual, still as carefree as he was when he came in. What was going on? Why wasn't he worried about his plan possibly being revealed? Was he that confident in his cipher? Iruka frowned at the last thought. He was getting worried that the prank plan for tomorrow would be huge if Naruto went so far as to write his plan within cipher process that was extremely difficult. That concern was what convinced Iruka to pull out all the stops on this one. Shortly after leaving the academy, Iruka took a different path toward a plain and unassuming building next to the Hokage Tower. Entering and walking through the dull and featureless hallways for a short while, he came upon the office of one of his friends, Hokusai Koyo. Knocking on the door politely, Iruka waited for a moment before a muffled "come in" was heard. He then opened the door and stepped through into a small office to see a black-haired chunin in a regular shinobi outfit sitting behind his desk, which was covered with papers. "Iruka! Please have a seat. Haven't seen you since poker night last month," Koyo greeted with a friendly smile. "It's good to see you too, Koyo. I look forward to taking your money again soon," Iruka replied good-naturedly as he sat down in a chair across from Koyo. "Ha! That was luck for you. Anyway, I'm sure you're not here for a social call." Koko decided to get to the point of Iruka's sudden visit, though he kept his friendly smile. "I'm afraid so. You know about my problem student? Uzumaki Naruto, right? I have to say he's a genius with pranks when you talk about him. Especially when he took your place for the day. Which reminds me, how's it going with Haruno-san? I'm sure that was an unexpected result even for your little prankster," Koko replied with wiggling eyebrows. Iruka had the decency to blush. "Yes. I think he was surprised when he saw the two of us being friendly with each other one day at the academy. Saki-chan and I are making plans for our third date soon," he replied with a chuckle before continuing. "Her daughter's probably going to find out about me at that point. Hopefully Sakura-san will take it well. Keep me updated. Anyway, what has Uzumaki done now? I'm noticing you have bags under your eyes as if you hadn't slept lately," Koyo inquired with a somewhat concerned expression. "You're right. I haven't slept at all last night because of this," Iruka replied as he took out the folded paper and handed it to Koyo before continuing. "That paper contains an enciphered message that Naruto wrote. He dropped it yesterday and I spent all night trying to decrypt it with some cryptography reference books. I've had no success. And it falls to me, Hokusai Koyo, one of the best cryptographers in the village, to decode this for my dear friend," Koyo declared with some flair as he opened the paper up to read over the content. "Yeah, I think you can figure this out. Also, you still owe me money from our last poker game, and I'll let the debt slide if you do this," Iruka said with a smirk, enjoying seeing his friend grumble in annoyance at being reminded about losing to him. "Well, I would have done this for free because that brat's cipher is good. The fact that I haven't been able to figure out the key at first glimpse makes this a special one in my case." "That doesn't sound good, Koyo," Iruka muttered, a little worried about his friend's chance of unscrambling the code in time. "It's been getting a little boring here lately. Nothing like a challenge to revive the higher brain functions in my head. It might be just gibberish, and this is the actual prank itself. I'd hate for you to spend a lot of time on this one if it's a bust in the end," Iruka offered, a little unsure of asking his friend to put in a lot of effort in this for nothing. "This is a real code. I may not recognize the cipher he used, but I can tell this hides a legitimate message. I doubt this is known anywhere in the nations though. I believe Uzumaki actually created this himself. Are you sure he's not just an average student?" Koyo inquired with suspicion, and Iruka shifted uncomfortably under his friend's questioning gaze. "His grades show he's directly in the middle of the field. Perfectly average in everything now that I think about it." He furrowed his brows and thought. "I suggest you take a closer look at him. That Nara brat may not be the only one hiding his potential in that classroom of yours," Koyo advised as he continued to pore over the code on the paper. "I may have to. For now, if Naruto created this himself, don't you need the key to even be able to figure this out? It would make the job easier, but part of our work as cryptographers is to find out the key for each different cipher. In addition to that, He made this an alphabetic substitution cipher. It means that it's plausible to figure out the key using the brute force method, as I match each letter in the code with the correct one by trial and error. That brat's good, and it probably would have taken you at least a couple weeks, but this won't take me more than a night. I actually think he left this out on purpose. I thought about that too. Why even bother encoding this if he's going to have to decode it each time he makes adjustment to the plan? Naruto didn't seem worried that I found his message when I saw him in class today. Iruka murmured more to himself than to Koyo, but his friend heard it all anyway. Maybe he's wondering if he left his plan out, he could risk being caught before the prank this code pertains to occurs. Make it a bit thrilling for himself, he offered. Sounds like him. He was complaining I was getting too easy to prank. Iruka grumbled with some irritation at his student's opinion. Koyo let out a chuckle. Anyway, I'm off tomorrow and I've got nothing to do tonight, so I'll be happy to decrypt this for you. Come by my place in the morning and I should have the code broken and ready for you. Sorry to dump this on you and thank you so much. Iruka replied with a grateful smile as he bowed his head. Next morning Iruka yawned loudly as he walked down a street toward his friend's residence. He did not sleep well last night. Despite Koyo's assurance of breaking the code, he wasn't able to help but worry constantly about what Naruto was going to do. Therefore, he allowed his mind to run a mile a minute as he went over what kind of prank his blonde nemesis was planning. With all of that on his mind, it was no wonder he slept only 3 hours in the past 48 hours. In the end, this made him exhausted, irritable, and nearly unable to think straight. Iruka hoped he would finally get an answer this morning before dragging his tired ass to the academy so he could effectively intercept whatever Naruto was planning. After having caught and gloated over Naruto, he would then dismiss the class early so he could go back home and sleep like a log for the next 24 hours. Easy to prank, my ass? Wait till I catch you and you'll see how easy I am to fool, Naruto. He thought with a tired grin as he dragged himself into an apartment building. After dragging himself up some stairs, he arrived in front of Koyo's door and knocked. A moment passed before Koyo opened the door. He let out a yawn as he stood in casual sleepwear. You're here, Iruka, and you look worse than I feel. Seriously, you look like you're about to fall over dead, Koyo said tiredly as he took in his friend's haggard appearance. I couldn't sleep while thinking about whatever Naruto was going to do. I think I'll actually fall over dead after I catch him, but it'll be worth it, Iruka replied with a half-assed smile. Koyo allowed a wince to appear on his face. Iruka, I broke the code. I'm afraid he's already successful. He spoke with some sympathy. Iruka's eyes widened then narrowed in confusion. Naruto did his prank? I haven't noticed. Nothing happened yesterday, or even this early in the morning. He tried to make sense of what his student did. Koyo let out a regretful sigh and walked back into his apartment to retrieve his notepad with the decoded message. He returned and silently handed it to his friend. Iruka stared down at the pad and his eyes widened as he repeatedly read over the message. A long moment of silence passed between the two men before Iruka broke it with a low chuckle. It can't be. He played me like a goddamn fiddle from the start, he murmured dejectedly as he slowly sank to his knees. His chuckling grew into a somewhat deranged laughter as the pad fell out of his hand. As it landed on the floor while Koyo moved in to try to snap his friend out of his sleep deprivation-induced insanity, the decoded message was visible. Ideas for a new prank. Drop this fake coded message for Sensei to find if found, then watch him spend the next day thinking over the code and write a useless message after this. Iruka-sensei is a poo-poo head. Soon at the academy, Mizuki stepped into the noisy classroom. The unusual sight of just a blue-haired assistant walking in was enough to silence all of the students, as they became curious about the whereabouts of their sensei. Due to an unfortunate ailment, Iruka-sensei will not be here today. We'll cover taijutsu today and the class will be dismissed early. On that note, move outside and get ready for practice, Mizuki announced before he walked out of the room with some students already starting to get up and cheering at being dismissed early. Hinata looked over at Naruto with a curious expression, while Ino regarded him with some suspicion. Ano. Naruto-kun, was that because of the prank you said you were planning for today? She inquired with a look that told Naruto he wasn't getting out of this one. Ino backed her up with a look of her own as well, though her cracking her knuckles was totally unnecessary in his opinion. Yep. All I had to do was write something in a piece of paper a couple days ago and let it play out. In other words, I made Iruka-sensei prank himself. He replied with a foxy grin. The girls raised a delicate eyebrow each at their friend's cryptic statement as they all walked out of the classroom. I guess that cipher you gave me worked very well, Naruto thought to his tenant. I wouldn't call it a cipher. It was actually a fake language I came across in a popular video game long ago. I figured since it's from a time long before this era but also somewhat easy to break with some effort, this language would be enough to keep that scarred man occupied for a couple days. Kurama explained. Video game? It's an electronic game you can play on a monitor using some sort of a computer. Since television was just invented once again in this civilization, that technology will likely be available soon enough. So you're saying this fake language was created just for a game? That seemed like a lot of effort. Naruto thought incredulously. And you played some of these games? It was a different time back then. Despite the humans' tenacity to destroy themselves often, there were long periods of peace in which humans had no major wars, so they found other things to do. It was boring for me, so I spent a lot of spare time in my human form playing these games to pass the time. However, you wouldn't believe the frenzy some of those humans go into over some games, especially ones based on warfare. Even in peacetime, they still wage fake wars in games titled Call of Duty and Battlefield among others. Kurama grumbled at the end. Naruto hummed to himself on the inside as he thought over this before he blinked in surprise. You have a human form? You try going through thousands of years as a giant fox and tell me how that'd work out for you with humans all around you. Of course, I took various forms throughout the history to avoid being bothered. It's easy enough for me as a chakra construct. Before you ask, I don't feel like showing you now, so you'll have to curb your curiosity for another time. Oh well, not like it's important. If you say this technology you spoke of will be coming soon, maybe I'll be so awesome and legendary by then they'll make a game or two about me. Ha! A Naruto game, yeah right. Kurama snorted. Omake number 1. Irika's first date with Saki. Irika was sitting across the table from a frowning Saki in the middle of a somewhat luxurious restaurant. The scarred man fidgeted as he nervously awaited the beautiful pink-haired woman's reaction to the truth he told her about their supposedly first encounter. He wished time would hurry, since each second they sat in silence felt like an eternity, as he watched Saki contemplate what he had just told her. Finally, she broke the silence with a calm voice. So, Irika-sensei, you're saying that when you supposedly came up to me out of nowhere and whispered naughty things, stuff that would make someone like Jiraiya-sama blush, into my ear, it was actually Uzumaki Naruto disguised as you? He let out a defeated sigh. He knew he could ruin this date before it truly began when he brought this up at the beginning, but his sense of honor would not allow him to lead Saki on any more than he had to. He resigned himself to the idea of her angrily leaving him at the table. Yes, Saki-san. I was out of the village on a mission, and it was Naruto who transformed himself and took my place to cause some mischief around the village. Even though it was him who did this was my responsibility as his sensei, and I truly am sorry for not clearing up this misunderstanding sooner. He spoke softly as he steeled himself when he saw a flash of annoyance and dejection in Saki's brilliant emerald eyes. That's unfortunate. To be honest, I was actually happy when you came up to me and made me feel wanted and appreciated. I apologize for putting you on the spot the other day. It's just I was so happy at the thought of a handsome and caring man like you coming after a single mother like me. She murmured in a dejected tone. It's true. Irika blurted out forcefully. What is? The thought of someone unimportant like me wanting to know a beautiful and strong woman like you. That was why I asked you out instead of just simply explaining this at the academy. Irika declared with steel in his voice, making Saki's eyes widen. He continued, his gaze fully locked with hers. Since the first time I saw you walking into the academy grounds holding your daughter's hand at the beginning of this year, I've always thought you're a beautiful woman. I could tell you're also a great and caring mother from the happy atmosphere between you and Sakura-san. I find that to be an excellent quality because of my job educating and caring for my own students. Before long, I found myself wishing I could break through my professional attitude to get to know you on a more personal basis. While I am sorry for my students' behavior, I'm glad it ended up with us here. I could then explain myself properly so you would know exactly how I feel about this, he said with a warm smile. Saki was dumbstruck as she found herself falling deep into Irika's black but warm eyes. Before she realized it, her hand instinctively reached out for one of Irika's hands on the table and gave it a squeeze. She took a shuddering breath as she fought to keep happy tears out of her eyes. She allowed a beautiful and grateful smile when Irika gave her hand a squeeze back, his smile growing warmer. Irika-sensei, please, There's no need for that suffix here. Okay then, I'll call you Irika-kun if you call me Saki-chan. She affirmed with an impish grin that drove Irika wild on the inside. You should know I've had my eyes on you since the beginning as well. The few times I've watched you teaching your students, I found myself getting attracted to your firm yet caring nature, especially when it involves Uzumaki Naruto. Irika raised an eyebrow at the mention of the blonde. Despite his ongoing pranking war with Naruto, he came to find himself caring for the blonde's welfare the more time they spent pissing each other off. I've seen how the previous instructors treated Uzumaki-san with indifference. They didn't technically do anything wrong, but because of his uniqueness, everyone could tell no one wanted to have anything to do with that child. It made me angry that someone who had to carry a heavy burden like him was so misunderstood. But then I saw how you actively put your time into paying attention to him, and to try to be firm with him, despite it being a useless venture. Saki giggled cutely at Irika's indignant frown when she made a jab at his futile endeavor in teaching Naruto some restraint with his behavior. I realized right there that you're very caring and would treat everyone, most importantly my daughter, with respect they deserve. You're also the first man since my husband died 7 years ago that I could imagine myself being willing to move on with, and I've been waiting and hoping for a private encounter with you someday after our first meeting. I suppose I have to thank Uzumaki-san for causing this to happen. Saki finished with a brilliant smile, in which Irika returned with one of his own. They settled into a content silence, their thumbs rubbing each other's knuckles as they continued to hold hands on the table. I have to admit I'm curious as to why he specifically picked me to prank that day, though. Saki suddenly inquired with a cute pout as she furrowed her delicate eyebrows in a deep thought. Irika couldn't keep himself from flinching in realization on exactly why that damn brat picked this gorgeous woman. Unfortunately for him, Saki noticed this and raised an eyebrow asking for an explanation. He sighed in defeat before proceeding to explain his reasoning. Oh, that brat! Saki growled, her cheeks red with indignation. Irika had to work to stifle his chuckling. I can't believe this! He doesn't even know me yet he thinks I would be such a bitch that I'd make your life miserable if I latched on to you. On the other hand, I'm going to have a long talk with Sakura-chan soon about her obsession with that Uchiha boy and her behavior in your classroom as of late. I raised her to be better than this, and she's too young to understand the difference between a silly crush and love. Saki finished with an annoyed pout, which made her unbearably cute to Irika. He finally could not hide his amused smirk, and he had to put his hands up in a weak defense against his date's annoyed scowl. I'm sorry, Saki-chan. I take responsibility for my wayward student once again, but you have to admit it made sense for Naruto to follow the old adage. Like mother, like daughter, in this case. However, it worked out the best for us in the end, should we decide to continue dating after this evening. He added the last part with a suave grin. Saki flashed him that heart-stopping impish grin he knew was going to be his favorite smile on this woman. Well, if I am to be such a nasty bitch, I have no choice but to make your life more miserable by demanding that you take me out on more dates in which we enjoy ourselves and have a lot of fun getting to know each other. She retorted with fake haughtiness before breaking down giggling. Her date showed her that knee-buckling smile, and she knew she was going to regret sticking with her self-imposed rule forbidding naughty stuff on the first date. Irika reached for his cup of sake and held it up. To Naruto for inadvertently setting us up together. I look forward to getting to know you more. Saki picked up her own cup and clacked it with Irika's, a happy smile plastered on her face. Amen to that. Oh, make number 2 for the Ika Empire. Naruto was walking down a busy street, mentally conversing with Kurama about random stuff. It was a beautiful day for a stroll with no cloud anywhere in the sky. He had to smile as he took in a breath of the cool and clean air. His relaxing day was shattered by a wail of pure suffering and anguish. No. After recollecting himself when he nearly jumped out of his skin in fright, he was worried about what caused such suffering. The voice sounded familiar too. He quickly jumped to the rooftops and followed the direction the scream came from for a few minutes until he came upon a pitiful scene. Poor Kakashi was on all fours in front of a local bookstore, surrounded by confused villagers. He was crying like a child, his tears and snot staining his face mask. On the floor in front of the pitiful-looking jounin was a certain orange book lying open. That was an unusual sight to Naruto since he knew Kakashi would have thrown himself in front of any kunai aimed for any orange book, and yet he was letting this copy get dirty on the ground. Oh, what are you doing, Kakashi-sensei? You're looking pathetic blubbering like that out here, and why is one of your precious porn books down there? Naruto pointed at the dirty book lying on the ground. He then had to step back at seeing Kakashi snap his head up at him with an angry glare. To imply that this travesty to the Aika Empire belonged to me is a grave insult. I refuse to acknowledge that book was written by the great Jiraiya-sama. He growled with newfound defiance. Naruto furrowed his eyebrows in confusion as he walked over to the book to pick it up, and quickly scanned the first few pages. This is definitely written by Ero Sennin, he confirmed after a moment. Lies. Heresy. Blasphemy. Kakashi denied loudly as he broke down, blubbering again. Not my problem, whatever you believe. I know he wrote this because I helped him do some editing on this, Naruto retorted nonchalantly. Kakashi froze in his crying. What did you say? The silver-haired Jounin's voice was quiet and calm. I helped him, you know. He was worried about his writing style being too far out of touch with the younger readers, so he asked for my help in figuring out how to change some of his usual terminology. At this point, Naruto turned his back to the older man as he talked. Kakashi slowly pushed himself off the ground to stand up straight behind the boy, his lone eye void of any emotion. Are you saying you're the reason terms like flower petal and honey pot have changed to? He struggled to finish. To slit and tunnel of love, yup. Naruto confirmed, unwittingly putting himself closer to death at the hands of a crazed Aika fan standing behind him. And soft mounds and bosom are gone in favor of knockers and tits. That's correct. Naruto continued, not noticing the cold feeling of foreboding emitting from the powerful Jounin behind him, scaring all the onlookers away. So, you're the reason for my precious Aika changing so much. Kakashi spoke in a sickeningly sweet tone with his lone eye crinkling into an eye smile. Naruto finally noticed the change in his sensei when he flinched and slowly turned around to see killing intent emitting from the large man in waves, and gulped. They stood staring at each other for a long minute. Naruto abruptly dashed off in an incredible burst of speed, but Kakashi was already blurring through hand seals. Kuchios no Jutsu! He shouted as Naruto heard multiple pops of smoke behind him. He took that as motivation to go even faster. He turned a corner and ran straight down a mostly empty street, straining his ears to listen for anything. At first, he was relieved to hear no sign of the man out for his blood behind him. However, that changed when he began to hear some rumbling and barking getting louder behind him. Risking a glance behind, he was nearly shocked into stopping upon seeing an ancient Greek-style chariot being pulled by 4 of Kakashi's larger summoned dogs as it tore down the street after him. Each dog were wearing a menacing-looking Spartan helmet and barking wildly. Kakashi was standing on the chariot brandishing a long spear with a small pug named Pakin on his head, wearing his own little Spartan helmet. The man urged his summons on and they were catching up on Naruto quickly. Die for the ICHA Empire! Kakashi roared with a comically angry expression while he prepared to aim the spear at the retreating blonde's ass. Pakin barked lazily from atop his summoner's head. Naruto's screams continued throughout the streets of the village for hours after that. Chapter 14. Everyone's Got Issues. Early one morning in Saki's bedroom in the Haruno household, sunlight shone in from the bedroom's lone window through a crack in the curtain. The thin beam of light crept up the well-worn hardwood floor toward a queen-sized bed sitting in the middle of the room and up onto its rumpled sheets. The light usually found a single woman sleeping comfortably in her bed many mornings for years. This time, it was now crawling across 2 distinct bodies under the sheets. Yumino Iruka was laying on his side with his head propped up on his left arm. He was awake, naked under the sheets, and silently watching the other occupant of this bed with an affectionate smile. She was cuddled tightly into his chest with her left leg hiked high up on his hip, and her left arm draped over his side. She was just as naked too, as Iruka was constantly reminded by the seemingly unlimited expanse of sinfully soft and creamy skin pressed up against him. Haruno Saki was sleeping peacefully using her other arm as a pillow with her shoulder-length pink hair splayed out behind. Her small and kissable lips were slightly parted, allowing her gentle breathing to caress Iruka's chest, tickling it a little. As his eyes took in the curves of her body, especially her perky and shapely B-cup breasts, and the wide and tempting hips she occasionally swayed in front of him, he let his mind wander a little to something a bit more serious for the moment. For the past week, he had been letting what his friend said bother him. Koyo had suggested that Uzumaki Naruto was to be watched closely, but he found it hard to believe that a notorious prankster like the blonde would have taken schoolwork seriously. To be honest, with all the time that he spent on pranks and getting into trouble, the sensei was surprised Naruto remained firmly in the middle of the field in terms of grades and skills. He could have been the class dope, yet he did just enough to get average scores. That niggled at Irika's consciousness a little as he wondered if Naruto was actually not even doing his best at all. He knew he was going to run out of patience soon and try something to confirm if Naruto had been hiding his potential or not. Having just decided that, he was jolted out of his train of thought when he felt a slight stirring in the woman cuddled up against his chest. Saki was beginning to wake up, but she still had her eyes closed. Sporting a mischievous grin, he decided to give her a nice wake-up call. Saki was almost surprised to feel some unfamiliar warmth and sensation next to her in bed that hadn't been there in the years since her husband passed away in an accident. She smiled slightly as she remembered last night after her very successful third date with Irika, and absolutely relished the warmth her new lover's shinobi-trained body was radiating. She was about to open her eyes when she received a very pleasant shock and couldn't contain a surprised gasp that escaped her mouth. Irika had reached down under the sheets to touch all fingertips of his right hand to a erogenous spot on the outside of Saki's thigh he found last night. He felt his lover's body stiffen a little, and because her leg was wrapped around his hips, he easily felt the flexing of the muscles in the thigh as she lightly clenched her toes in surprised pleasure. His body tingled pleasantly upon feeling and hearing Saki's surprise, but her eyes were still closed. He then slowly moved his fingertips up her thigh and felt her shiver. A quiet but happy moan forced itself out of Saki's throat as she opened her emerald eyes to gaze lustfully into a pair of mischievous black eyes. The woman smiled dazzlingly as she began to writhe under Irika's ministrations as he continued slowly ghosting his fingertips up the hips, onto the side of her torso, before inching close to one of her delectable mounds. At this point, Saki was whimpering quietly and arching her body into the touch, desperate for more skin contact. Irika decided to tease her by tracing his fingertips painfully slow once around her left breast, making her growl quietly in frustration, before he finally cupped it. Saki moaned throatily as she felt her sensitive breasts respond enthusiastically to the rough texture of Yuka's hand. For the scarred man, it might not have been the first time he fondled her soft bosom, but it felt like it each time his sense of touch took in the amazingly smooth texture of her firm and supple mound. Saki jolted as if shocked when he delicately rubbed his thumb against the hardening dark red nipple. He carefully rubbed it for a few minutes while the woman continued to writhe under the gentle teasing, her leg tightening around his hips and her arm that was draped over his torso withdrawing to rub his muscular stomach somewhat frantically. In the meantime, Irika slowly slipped his other arm underneath the woman and wrapped around her. Safe was the only word Saki had to describe the feeling that spread through her when the man pulled her close enough that her body molded itself to his. Since her husband's death, she had worked hard to raise Sakura by herself for the past 7 years. Although she hid it well from her daughter, she almost had a complete emotional breakdown after Sakura begged her to give permission to attend the Shinobi Academy. How could she not feel nervous when her only daughter, the only true link between herself and her deceased husband, was going to throw herself into the kind of profession and environment that were unforgiving to women on nearly all levels, especially if they were captured? She also often dealt with high stress in the cutthroat world of middle management until she finally obtained the top position in her bank. She did all of this to provide a comfortable lifestyle for her daughter and herself. She always thought she was strong by managing to stick it out alone through all the hardships just for her daughter, but there always was a small void within herself that she wasn't able to ignore on more than one occasion. Focused on raising her daughter, she had forgotten about her own happiness and the feelings of safety and contentment she was used to receiving from her dead husband. Last night brought everything back to the surface for Saki, and she felt like she finally found that missing piece of herself. The independent part of her hated to admit this, but she truly missed the addictive feeling of being safe and desired that only a man like Irika was able to give her in the privacy of a bedroom. All of her worries simply faded away as if repelled by Irika's arms wrapped around her, and she had forgotten how much she loved that. Saki smiled inwardly as she wasn't afraid to admit she would never think about dating other men because she decided Irika was perfect for her. Each date only served to cement that thought further, and last night left her completely unable to imagine going through the rest of her life without this man by her side in any capacity. To normal civilians, this was likely moving too fast, but Saki somehow understood how most shinobi worked from her observations. In this dangerous and fast-paced world, shinobi never bothered debating major life-changing decisions for too long, and usually followed their instincts. From the look of adoration growing in Irika's eyes lately, Saki knew he was letting himself fall just as hard for her as she was for him. The only thing that worried her was his dangerous life as a shinobi, but she took solace in the fact that he was too valuable as a full-time sensei to see action outside the village's wall often for the foreseeable future. Finally, she had enough of being teased by Irika's ministrations. She quickly snaked her hand up Irika's firm chest and around to the back of his neck before yanking him in roughly for a soul-searing good morning kiss. After a long minute of passionate lip lock, they broke apart for air and Saki let out another pleasant moan as she snuggled again into his chest. "Good morning, Saki-chan," Irika murmured with a dazed grin as he moved his right hand from her soft mound to rake fingers through her hair, carefully smoothing out a few strays. Saki sighed contentedly before kissing Irika's chest a few times, making his body tingle from the soft sensations there. "Good morning. That's a good way to wake me up, Irika-kun. You'd better do that more often in the future," Saki demanded lightly with a dazed grin of her own. They settled into a comfortable silence, holding each other for a few minutes before the pink-haired woman suddenly spoke up. "I can't believe you had your way with me 6 times last night, and only Cammy knows how many times I went over the edge from start to finish. My legs are still twitching a little and I don't think I'll be able to walk right all day," she cooed in awe as Irika blushed. As if to confirm her statement, her leg draped over Irika's hips twitched slightly, making him chuckle softly before he continued in a worried tone. "I'm sorry, Saki-chan. Was I supposed to do it once or twice?" Saki giggled cutely at his slightly guilty expression. "Oh, Irika-kun, you can do this to me as many times as you'd like. I think I'm one of the few women in this village that can handle a stamina freak like you. I guess all that time and energy spent chasing futilely after our resident prankster had to work out in other ways." She giggled again at Irika's expression of mock indignation before continuing. "You'll have to stick with me if you want to be happy in the love-making department," she slyly said as she brought her left hand up to his chest and spread out all fingers to softly caress it, making Irika sigh in contentment. "I never planned on going anywhere even long before our amazing night together. You do realize this was my first time and I most likely would improve with experience in the future?" Irika supplied with a mischievous smirk. Saki's eyes glazed over at the implications before she fixed him with a lustful look that clearly said he wasn't leaving her clutches without adding to last night's total at least a few more times. Seeing this, his smirk widened as he removed his hand from her hair. Saki's disappointed groan turned into a blissful mew when he cupped the same soft mound as before and resumed rubbing his thumb over her rock-hard nipple again. "Oh, Cammy, please. I need you to make me unable to walk today," she begged huskily as she arched her body again into her lover's ministrations and was about to move in for another round of kissing. However, she was confused, and incredibly frustrated, when Irika suddenly stopped everything and perked his head up, as if he was alert for something. He narrowed his eyes at the bedroom's door. "I can sense someone coming to the door. It's most likely Sakura-san," he warned quietly as he glanced down at her for any suggestion. Saki growled in irritation before she reluctantly separated from him and sat up, pulling up the sheet to barely cover up to her bust. She glanced around for any place to hide her lover, but the closet was full and the bathroom was out in the hallway. Worried, she looked back at Irika only to almost yelp in shock upon finding him gone. He even made sure to hide any sign that another person was in bed with her in that little time. Already missing the warmth next to her, she straightened up just as there was knocking at the door. She was relieved to note Irika's clothes were discarded on the opposite side of the bed from the door, out of sight. She was usually messy with her own clothes, so her daughter wouldn't even spare a glance at her pieces littering the room. Clearing her voice, she called out, "Yes, sweetie?" The door slowly opened to reveal a younger version of Saki, only with waist-length pink hair that was brighter compared to her own shoulder-length hair's dark pink. Not for the last time, Saki wondered if such long hair would have helped her daughter with being a kunoichi, or if it was all for getting a certain boy's attention. Sakura was dressed as a civilian in a red t-shirt, navy blue shorts, and white sandals. Her emerald eyes widened upon seeing her mother's state of undress. "Good morning, Mom. Decided to do without your usual lingerie last night?" she said with a curious smirk, as her eyes seemed to search her mother's figure hidden under the thin sheet. Saki blushed and literally felt Irika raise an eyebrow in interest from somewhere in the room. "So what if an old woman like me needs to feel sexy sometimes?" she grumbled, her blush growing. Sakura let out an exasperated sigh. "Mother, you're a gorgeous 28-year-old woman with a successful career as a bank manager. You're not in the prime of your life yet, and you already have a daughter about to live her own life soon if I graduate. Most women would kill to have your luck, job, and beauty. The only reason you took a while to get your position at the bank was because you had me early. Saki blushed even more and waved the compliments away. My beautiful flower, you know there's no need for you to hurry and be independent. Just please take your time deciding your own path before you even think of moving out. Anyway, is there a reason you came to see me? She tried to change the subjects while noting, with some amusement, that her daughter was not so subtly checking her out. Sakura snapped out of her small trance and blinked a few times as if to remember what she came into her mother's bedroom for. Oh, sorry, I forgot. It's just that seeing you like that made me think of how I would look in the future, and I know I'm going to be so beaut. Sakura-chan. Right. Well, Ino-chan invited me over to spend the day and night with her. I won't be back here until tomorrow. Would that be okay with you, Mom? Hearing this made Saki want to jump around the room, cheering at the top of her lungs for this lucky turn of events, allowing her to be alone with her new lover longer. However, she had to keep her composure. That's that would be fine. I see you took my advice and decided to patch things up with your friend. Ha! It was more like an ultimatum. Sakura stopped her muttering cold upon seeing her mother's sharp glare. Not that I'm complaining, Mom. Just please keep in mind that if you had kept that behavior up, you would have ended up alone and bitter, and there's no guarantee that Uchiha boy would keep you company. Saki reminded. She sighed when she watched her daughter frown. I may agree with some of what you said, Mom, but I still want Sasuke-kun to notice me. Saki pinched the bridge of her nose. I'm not going to interfere too much with which boy you like, no matter how wrong I think the choice may be. That's your lesson to learn if it turns out bad. The blatant insinuation that Saki didn't think highly at all of the last loyal Uchiha, despite most of the village's opinion to the contrary, earned her an annoyed scowl from Sakura. She continued anyway. Just please take your training as a kunoichi seriously and keep up your eating. I have my sources and I'll know if you've been slacking off and skipping your lunches with that ridiculous diet. I didn't let you beg me into allowing you to enroll in the academy just so you could come out of it weak and unprepared. You would risk being killed or, even worse for a young and beautiful girl like you, captured on your first mission out of this village. If I get on the same team as Sasuke-kun, he would keep me safe if I got into any trouble. Sakura declared with such conviction that not even her mother could try to rebuke her without starting a huge argument. Saki decided it was good enough that she managed to convince Sakura to improve her health and relationships with her peers for now. She would worry about her daughter's obsession with the Uchiha boy for another time. She flopped back down on her bed in exasperation. Okay, you can go. I'm not in the mood to make breakfast, so you'll have to get something on the way or at your friend's house. Sakura put on a happy expression and turned to leave. Here's a reminder though. The young Haruno turned back toward her mother only to have her face turn red with an intense blush. Saki had thrown off the sheet covering her body and was striking a sexy pose. It was the most beautiful body Sakura had seen so far in her life, and she got incredibly jealous of her own mother. She irrationally decided on the spot that she wasn't going to let Sasuke meet her mother until long after their wedding. Meanwhile, Iruka was wondering how the younger Haruno didn't hear the loud whoosh of all his blood rushing to a certain appendage on his body in an instant, while he took in the sight of Saki posing in all of her divine beauty. I never needed to cut down on eating to get all of this. All I did was exercise regularly for a couple hours or so every other day. Imagine what you could get if you kept up a proper diet and did your training seriously. Saki said with a smirk. She had to stifle a laugh as she watched her sputtering daughter stagger out of the room in a daze and close the door. After a few long moments, she heard the front door to her house open and close. She relaxed in her bed. So what's this I hear about you wearing lingerie regularly? I thought that incredible red number you wore last night was just for me. Iruka's teasing voice echoed around the room. Saki blushed. So I'm a little vain and I like to feel sexy underneath my clothes most days. Any complaint? I doubt it. Nothing beats your birthday suit, though. Saki smiled brightly and stretched her body erotically, purposely flaunting all of her best features to lure the prey out of hiding. Alright, time for you to come out and play. On a related note, you'd better not have any plan today, because I'm not letting you leave this house. She called out softly as she glanced around for any sign of her lover. She finally looked up directly above at the high ceiling and burst out laughing. Right above the bed was Iruka, in all of his naked glory, sticking to the ceiling facing down with chakra on his back, feet, and fingertips. He was sporting a sheepish grin. I suppose I'll have to keep you company, Saki-chan. he retorted in mock exasperation as he continued to stay up there staring down at her with longing in his eyes. I'm waiting for you to come down here anytime soon, Irika-kun. Saki whispered his name breathlessly as she traced all of her 10 fingertips in a sexy fashion all over her upper body, especially in circles around her breasts, to entice him. I actually like the show from up here. Irika teased, making her pout adorably, but she couldn't help but revel in her lover's eyes hungrily exploring every single inch of her body. She slowly turned over to show off her flawless back and perky rear end for his eyes to drink in. You got lucky just now, Saki purred as she turned her head upward with an impish grin. She started moving her cute derriere side to side in a slow rhythm. Oh really? And having you as my lover wasn't lucky? The man on the ceiling replied smoothly even as he was being dazzled by her hypnotizing butt. Saki smiled happily at that compliment before her half-lidded gaze moved to a certain part of her lover's body. With that big thing you have hanging from between your legs, it's a wonder Sakura-chan didn't catch any glimpse of it, despite your best effort to hide up there. Saki teased with a saucy grin. She got her reaction as she watched her lover sputter in surprise and embarrassment, and he lost control of his chakra for an instant. He dropped from the ceiling with a surprised yelp and crashed onto the bed next to Saki, making her bounce once from the impact. She shook with laughter from his goof up for a moment before gasping and becoming still when she felt a warm and muscular arm slowly wrap around her abdomen from behind. She then was pulled in closer with her back becoming completely flush against Irika's chest. The amazing feeling of being safe spread throughout her again, and it really was addicting and extremely arousing. She moaned lightly when she felt Irika's lips ghosting gently, and slowly up the side of her neck toward her ear. They inched close enough to almost touch her earlobe, but not quite. You little minx! Irika's husky whisper with the warm breath on her sensitive earlobe made her eyes flutter and her whole body shivered. Her breathing hitched each time she felt him slowly plant a light kiss back down her neck onto her shoulder, and she became acutely aware of his hand on her abdomen inching its way slowly down to the hot and soaked spot between her instinctively opening legs. Her initial gasps gave way to passionate moans as Irika proceeded to show her what he thought was the appropriate punishment for teasing. Soon at the academy's target range thunk. A satisfying sound echoed throughout the shuriken throwing range. Irika smiled as he marked down another perfect 25 next to Uzumaki Naruto on his clipboard. Next to him was his blonde nemesis with an outstretched hand in front of him. The boy stood at one end of a long target range with life-size dummies set at certain distances from him. He had just hit the farthest target, set at 50 meters, in one of its eyes, a most likely fatal wound on a real human. That was his first attempt out of 4. He needed to make the remaining throws into fatal hits to get the full 100 points. So far, only Uchiha Sasuke, top in throwing, had been consistent with getting between 95 to 100 on each throwing accuracy test. In comparison, Irika noticed Naruto usually got 75 points. Upon making the hit, Irika and Naruto heard a mixture of cheering and jeering from behind them as the rest of the class picked sides and rooted for Naruto to either beat Sasuke's most recent score of 95 points, or to fail miserably. Irika noticed with a small scowl that Sakura was still passionately cheering the Uchiha boy on and throwing some light insults at Naruto. Saki was going to be displeased hearing his report on her daughter later. At least she hadn't uttered her usual insult of Naruto baka for a while now. Next throw, Irika said dully as he returned his attention to Naruto. The boy nodded with a confident smirk and took out another shuriken. It wasn't obvious, but now that Irika was paying extra attention to Naruto, he noticed several subtle signs of the blonde being too smooth and sure in his preparation. He barely managed to act like he only had novice instructions in throwing. However, the key word was act. Irika suspected Naruto might have easily beaten Sasuke if he felt like it from how he handled his shuriken, and kunai like an expert. What puzzled Irika the most was why was this amazing child in front of him hiding his true potential. Now that he was paying attention to Naruto since Koyo's words wormed their way into his subconscious weeks ago, he found signs that his student was holding himself back in everything. However, since he had no solid evidence, he couldn't confront Naruto about this. The boy was clever enough to worm his way out of any possible confrontation looking like the offended party. Thunk. The sound shook Irika out of his thoughts. A quick glance down the range confirmed the second shuriken embedded deeply into the farthest dummy's throat. Another round of cheering and jeering and another 25 points next to Naruto's name on the clipboard. It was time for a small prank of his own on the blonde. Iruka knew from observing this boy's past tests that Naruto usually followed a pattern of 25-25-15-10 with his 4 throws, which added up to his usual score of 75 points. The sensei wasn't going to let that happen this time. He figured Naruto had set a predictable pattern because no student or instructor bothered to notice it until now, and was willing to bet the boy got complacent in his throwing, as if he was just going through the motions ever since the students first picked up shuriken and kunai. A little psychological trick was likely going to throw a wrench into the blonde's mental gears. Second throw. He lied slyly as he kept his voice to barely a whisper only Naruto heard to avoid any of the students gathered nearby calling the sensei out on it. It worked as he did not note any change in Naruto's focused expression upon hearing the deliberate misdirection, not realizing he was off count now. Naruto quickly took another shuriken out with some impressive dexterity, and flicked his wrist expertly. Iruka's eyes followed its flight trajectory all the way to the farthest dummy. Thunk. The third shuriken struck true in the center of the forehead. Iruka was impressed because that part of the dummy was made thicker than the rest of the body to stimulate a hard skull, and the shuriken had embedded itself almost halfway in. It was a fatal hit, no question. He barely contained his smirk as he marked down another 25. His eyes flickered over to Naruto as the boy seemed to have realized his mistake in getting complacent, if the widening of his blue eyes was any indication. Iruka then wondered what his student was going to do since the lowest amount of points awarded on a hit was 10. If Naruto made another hit, it would push his score above average for this one test compared to his usual streak of perfectly average scores. On the other hand, he might deliberately miss the dummy completely to get the automatic 0 and keep the score 75 if he was desperate enough. However, that was a one-way ticket to constant jeering for the remainder of his academy days. Not even the worst student in class missed the target completely at this point. What's the total now? Naruto's eerily quiet voice drew Iruka's attention to the blonde, and his insides just about froze upon seeing an icy glare in his direction. Naruto was obviously really annoyed about his sensei tricking him. Forcing himself to look directly into narrowed blue eyes took a bit of effort, but he succeeded. S75. The next shot will push you up into above average for this test. I think it's about time, too, Iruka declared resolutely as he kept his steely gaze leveled with Naruto's. The blonde just closed his eyes in irritation and let out an annoyed sigh. Sorry. I'm just not used to any sensei caring about me. However, it's annoying having you meddle here at this point, he whispered, making sure his classmates didn't hear the conversation between him and his sensei. Iruka felt some irritation and a little hurt at being dismissed as meddlesome. I know what I'm doing. Just let me do my own thing, please, Naruto added, his piercing gaze boring into Iruka's eyes before the sensei turned away. Fine. I expect an explanation for this soon. So are you going to miss here at the risk of being jeered mercilessly to keep your perfectly average score? He challenged with a smirk. Naruto's eyes flashed with annoyance again before he then let out a calming breath and schooled his expression. No, I hate missing. I'm just going to make you regret pushing me this far, he retorted with a smirk of his own as he took out his final shuriken in his right hand and winded back much farther than Iruka had seen from the blonde. With a loud grunt he swung his arm down with all of his effort before releasing. Iruka's alert eyes didn't pick up the flying shuriken at all. Boom! The sensei and the rest of the class jumped at the sudden explosion. Iruka immediately gathered himself and cautiously looked down the range at the farthest dummy, now obscured by a cloud of dust and splinter, with a growing sense of dread. When the cloud cleared, the male onlookers' pained groans and the females' murmurs of disbelief filled the air as Iruka stared in stunned silence. No one noticed Naruto had already disappeared from the range. The dummy remained mostly intact with the exception of a jagged fist-size hole where its crotch once was. Barely keeping his shaking hands from instinctively covering his crotch for protection, the pale-faced Iruka slowly brought his clipboard and pen up to mark the final 25 points. Yu Uzumaki and Naruto gets the top score today with 100 points due to his 4 fatal hits, especially the last one, he stuttered in a high-pitched voice. Not even the extremely pale Uchiha Sasuke could bring himself to feel jealous over Naruto's score and display today. Much to Iruka's annoyance, Naruto adjusted his total average to his preferred level when he deliberately limited himself to 50 points on the next shuriken test. To add more to his sensei's irritation, Naruto disguised this lower-than-usual performance by attempting to throw all 4 shuriken at the same time with one hand in the test, something he never displayed before that day. It took all Iruka had to not put down another 100 out of spite for the damn brat. In his opinion, Naruto actually threw the shuriken exactly where he wanted them to go anyway. It took Saki's soothing words later that night to bring her lover out of his bad mood, which slightly worsened earlier when she laughed uproariously upon hearing what Naruto did. Soon in the Hokage's office. "Burn, you little bastards! Burn, damn you!" An old man chanted out loud as he glared heatedly at several tall stacks of paper sitting before him on his desk. "I'm sorry, Hokage-sama. That's not going to work," a male's voice cautiously called out from his hiding spot next to the bookcase on one side of the office. The third shoulders slumped. "An old man can only hope, Lion-san. Especially a long-suffering, unable to retire old man," he muttered grouchily. "Why not just use a fire jutsu to dispose of them?" Yugao's voice helpfully interjected from the office's couch across the room from the bookcase. "Because it can be traced back to me, Nico-san. At least if all of the paper here combusted from nothing but my glaring, any of you would say it happened without my involvement due to insufficient proof. You think we would get you into trouble, Hokage-sama? When we've sworn to protect our beloved and amazing leader from any danger, including mounting paperwork?" Yugao softly spoke with a hint of mock hurt in her tone. "No, I have faith in all of you to keep me out of trouble," the third replied with a grandfatherly smile before his expression instantly turned deadpan. "You just blackmailed the hell out of me instead." "Damn right!" All three hit an A and BU chorused with grins. After a moment of chuckling all around, Bor, who was hiding up in the ceiling just above the Hokage, suddenly spoke up. "Nico, I've noticed you seem to get the nice and easy spot on the couch often lately while I'm once again close to accidentally shoving my head up my ass with a sneeze here in this tiny space. Is it just my imagination?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Yugao quickly replied in a too innocent tone while subtly shifting her gaze away from the ceiling, even though she was currently camouflaged. "Oh, I do know. Nico-san was nice enough to blackmail me into assigning her that spot often whenever she's guarding here. That was in exchange for keeping quiet about my certain preferences in literature from my lovely daughter-in-law," the third clarified with a smirk as Yugao cringed upon being made. "So you don't mind me accidentally letting it slip to Kane-san about the literature you keep hidden in the desk now?" The cap-masked woman grumbled as she felt Bor's annoyed glare aimed in her direction. "I would have minded if she hadn't found out on her own, Nico-san. You'll be happy to know the talking to she gave me was the stuff of legends. In the meantime, you'll have to find something else to blackmail me with while you enjoy the lovely and comfortable spot up in the ceiling for the next 7 shifts here." The Hokage grinned as he felt Yugao flinch under her camouflage. "We are going to have a nice chat after this shift on the difference between joking and actually blackmailing our great and wise leader, Nico. Especially on the folly of messing with the one who signs our paychecks and assigns us to as many suicide missions as he wants." Lion teased good-naturedly while Bor grumbled, but the promise of changing to a more comfortable position for the foreseeable future cheered him up some. The female A and BU let out a defeated sigh. A knock was heard on the office door a few minutes later. The third called for his guest to enter, and in stepped Yumino Iruka with a determined frown on his face. The aged leader raised an eyebrow in intrigue as he watched the Chunin walk briskly up to the desk. "Hokage-sama, I have questions about my student, Uzumaki Naruto, that I think you can answer as the Academy's headmaster." "Ah, what has he done this time, Iruka-kun?" the third muttered wearily as if he repeated that line hundreds of times. "No, he's been good, at least so far this week. He's been getting perfectly average grades in everything now, which is why I'm here," Iruka said nervously while the third stared blankly at his subordinate. No one said anything for a moment. "And, is that an issue, Iruka-kun?" "I am not aware of any rule barring students with average grades from graduating," Hiruzen slowly said with a raised eyebrow, trying to pull more information out of Iruka with a gentle go-on gesture. However, the wise leader caught on to where this conversation was heading, and awaited the young man's conclusions as he fought to keep a knowing smile from forming on his lips for the moment. "It's normally not an issue except that I believe Naruto was holding himself back in everything. For what reason, I don't know, but I feel it's a waste of his potential if he does not try to get the praises and achievements he deserves," Iruka blurted out. He wasn't expecting the old man's reaction, however. "All right, looks like I win. Pay up," Hiruzen called out with a huge grin as he held a hand up in the air. Iruka heard grumbling from around him before 3 sharp whooshes filled the air and a small pile of coins and bills suddenly appeared out of thin air on the outstretched hand. "I'll have to go after Kakashi-kun and Dragon-san for the rest of my winnings," the old man said happily as he pocketed his hard-won money. Irika stared incredulously at his superior. What the hell was that? That was me winning the betting pool. The betting pool? Irika repeated, his voice calmer and less bewildered than it should have been. The one in which we bet on how long it would have taken for you to notice Naruto-kun's true potential. I'm the only one that picked this week for when you finally found out. Sarutobi explained as he leaned back in his chair, basking in his victory. Irika could only stare in stunned silence. When Hokage-sama assigned you to this year's class, we knew your famous professional attitude would have you pay close attention to Naruto-san's performance. We then believed you would be the first sensei to find out he was hiding his true strength. With that, we made bets on when you would put together the pieces. I had you down for 1 month after the upcoming summer break. Yugao explained as she appeared out of thin air sitting on the couch. Irika looked over to stare at the purple-haired Anbu incredulously for 1 moment before he snapped out of it. Putting that aside, it's obvious I was correct in my assumption based on your reaction, Hokage-sama. The question now is, what are we going to do about Naruto? He should be recognized for his true skills. You know how tough his life's been, and he deserves some positive attention coming his way. Irika quickly moved the conversation along to forget about the surreal situation just now. The Hokage secretly felt proud when he saw that Irika seemed to have quickly gotten over the fact Naruto carried the demon fox that killed his parents. Don't worry about this. I've been keeping an eye on him for far longer than you have, and I know exactly what he's capable of. Please let him do whatever he likes. For now, he should be enjoying his time with his friends and having fun. The Hokage spoke with a stern expression. But nothing, Irika-kun. He will be rewarded and recognized for his hard work and talents. You can be assured of that because I already have a plan for him when he graduates. If you say so, Hokage-sama. I hope for an explanation someday, though. It's just that I don't like looking the other way when a student is obviously holding back. Irika grumbled somewhat dejectedly as Hiruzen smiled gently. Look at it this way, Irika-kun. A major part of being a shinobi is to keep most information about him hidden for maximum advantage. In that regard, Naruto-kun is already the best student in an academy that trains shinobi. You just have to look at this from a different angle, not from a grade book. Plus, this is also making my job much easier when I assign teams after graduation. Hokage-sama? If he somehow ended up being the rookie of the year or dead last, I might have been inclined to assign him what may have been incompatible teammates because of that tradition of balancing out the top male and female students with the dead last. At least this way, if he remains in the middle of the field, I can assign him wherever I need him to go without grief from others. The third explained. After a moment of silence, Irika let out a sigh and gave a reluctant nod. I suppose that makes a little sense. Thank you for explaining some of your reason, and I look forward to seeing the extent of his true potential someday. He replied with a hesitant smile before excusing himself from the office. Another moment of silence passed. So you hear Yumino-san finally got laid last week? And at the ripe old age of 23, too. That's practically over the hill in shinobi years. Lion's awestruck voice broke the silence. And just what the hell am I supposed to be at my age, Lion-san? Sarutobi growled in mock offense while Yugao failed to fight down her laugh. Hokage-sama, you're fucking immortal. That's what the hell you're supposed to be. Boar joked from above, making everyone chuckle. Credible source? Yugao queried as she stretched to get some soreness out of her body from sitting for so long. As good as it gets. One of my friends saw him slipping out through the main bedroom window at the Harino residence early one morning. His hair was down, and his clothes were somewhat ruffled. My friend thought nothing of it until he realized the implications yesterday. Lion reported. Your friend's a little slow, isn't he? Even a 5-year-old could tell Yumino-san got some from those signs, Yugao retorted unimpressed while everyone felt Lion's shrug in weak defense of his friend. After a moment, the female Anbu suddenly stood up and exclaimed in realization. Everyone's attention snapped to her. I just remembered we set up a pool about his virginity. We need to find out who picked last week, she said excitedly. I did. A deep voice sent the room into a dead silence as all Anbu looked over at their leader in stunned disbelief. A victorious smirk was plastered on one Sarutobi Hiruzen's face as he raised his hand into the air, outstretched. One spring day at Training Ground 42. You're a tough bastard to fight. Naruto muttered as he shook off some numbness in his right hand. In front of him with his fists up was Abdurrahim Shino, standing tall in a light gray trench coat closed all the way from bottom to top. The coat's tall collar and his dark sunglasses obscured most of his stoic face so that only his spiky brown hair was clearly visible. The heir to the insect-using clan that relied on logic instead of emotions shifted into a defensive kata. I would say the same about you, Naruto-san, albeit in more polite terms. The tall boy replied in an even tone that didn't betray any emotion he carried inside. Naruto just showed a challenging smirk. Let's continue. Shall we? Indeed. With a quick shout, Naruto dashed in to deliver a hard right that Shino effortlessly parried with his left. That started off a flurry of punches and kicks that narrowly missed each other as they both displayed technical excellence in their fighting styles. Naruto with his modified academy style and Shino with his clan style that focused primarily on grappling and submission moves. The style was designed to easily transfer the clan's famous Kikaichu bugs onto the opponent via prolonged contact. Who knew the clan we supposedly viewed as primarily trackers and long-distance fighters would have such a nice close-quarters fighting style like this? Naruto commented with no hint of surprise in his tone, while he gave a head slip to a palm strike that grazed his cheek while he stepped into his opponent's guard to throw an elbow to the sternum which was blocked by Shino's other arm. Naruto quickly transitioned his arm from the elbow strike into a rising backhand heading directly for Shino's nose. It was easily blocked when Shino quickly shifted his arm up to intercept it before he tried to snare the fist and attempt an armlock takedown and submission, only for the blonde to slip out of the bug user's personal space in the next instant. It would be illogical to leave ourselves vulnerable should our opponents manage to get in close. Just as it would be illogical for you or anyone else to automatically assume us weak in that regard. Shino answered in his usual stoic tone as he stepped into feign with a left jab then a right grappling attempt that didn't fool Naruto one bit when he suddenly shot his right leg out into a powerful forward thrust kick to push his opponent back. Shino, upon seeing his feigning attempt fail, quickly mirrored the kick with his own right leg and both thrusts connected solidly with each other's torso. The resulting clash pushed both combatants back several meters until they dug in their heels to stop sliding any farther apart. Despite the exchange, neither really took any damage. Naruto flashed a feral grin while Shino's sunglasses glinted with intent before they dashed at each other ready for more sparring. Wow! Not including Naruto, I think Shino-san's on par with Sasuke-san and Kiba-san in taijutsu. I wonder why he doesn't show much of that skill in classes. Ino commented in awe as she watched the spar with Hinata, Shikamaru, Choji, and Kiba. They were sitting on the ground at the edge of the clearing to give both Naruto and Shino space, while they rested from their own training. Hinata, as expected, was watching Naruto with a contented expression, since she was happy that he was having fun. Shikamaru was watching with a bored expression, but anyone who knew him well would know he was analyzing every single move in the bout. Choji was merely eating out of a bag of chips, but he was also watching the bout and learning as well. Kiba let out a yawn and stretched while keeping an eye on the spar too. Troublesome. Naruto's obviously hiding his full potential, even from most of us, just so he'll have people underestimate him. What makes you think he was the only one in our class holding back? Shikamaru drawled out as his eyes flickered between the two combatants. I could say the same about you, Shika. I wonder if you're actually fooling anyone anymore with that lazy-ass act. Ino shot back. What act? The pineapple-haired boy retorted with a confused expression, making everyone but Ino chuckle as she growled in annoyance for a moment before she smirked. With the way you're bombing the exams on purpose lately, one would think you're desperately trying to be on the same team as Sasuke-san and Forehand-chan, with both of them currently top students and you as the current dead last. Her smirk widened as she watched her longtime friend flinch in horror. Perhaps I should improve myself just a bit more. Shikamaru finally grumbled after a long moment of inwardly battling within himself on which was more troublesome, doing more work in class or being teamed with that arrogant ass. Sakura wasn't much of an issue for him lately as she seemed to have toned down her fangirl behavior and applied herself more seriously to actual shinobi training. Ino-chan, I've noticed you don't seem to be trying to be on the same team as Sasuke-san lately. Naruto-kun was kind enough to tell us about how they assign teams upon graduation, and I thought you would have made use of that information. Hinata commented. She noticed Ino's lack of interest in Sasuke as of late, and that she dropped the kun suffix. When they all enrolled into the academy 4 years ago, Ino was as much a fangirl as most other girls were, but her interest seemed to have begun declining a year ago or so. The Hyuga heiress also didn't fail to notice that her friend was paying more attention to Naruto as of late. She wasn't sure how to feel about that. She knew about Naruto's small crush on the beautiful platinum blonde, and she had mixed feelings about that. She loved Ino dearly like another sister, but she was also worried about the potential conflicts this would cause between all three of them. To be honest, she couldn't bring herself to put up a definitive stance against Ino's possible interest in Naruto. They were friends longer than she had been with the handsome blonde, and, as much it pained her to admit, Ino had Naruto's affection first, even if it was a small amount. Until Naruto finally noticed all the affection from the females close to him, Hinata decided it would be best to wait and see before establishing an idea on what to do about this. The pretty platinum blonde just shrugged at her earlier observations. While I could compete with Sakura-chan for the top kunoichi spot, I'm making use of that information to avoid being placed with Sasuke-san since I know I'm better off with Shika and Choji as teammates. I guess I grew up a little and realized there are better choices out there. He's handsome and cool in some ways, but that's it. If I actually dated him, I don't think I would have the patience to deal with his brooding after some time. It's not like I'm the only one doing this, though. You're easily the strongest girl in this class. Hell, the second strongest overall behind Naruto. Ino smirked as she watched her friend blush something fierce at her compliment. Ayano, you're putting too much stock in my skills, Ino-chan, Hinata murmured shyly with averted eyes as she poked her index fingers together. Ino snorted, not believing her friend, but decided to let it go for now as she had something to ask. I wonder about this. Why didn't Naruto go for the Rookie of the Year? If both of you went for the top spots, it's a guarantee you would be teamed together. I would like that, but it doesn't seem possible. He doesn't care about that, and I'm sure you've noticed by now how most people viewed him for most of his life. Hinata replied softly, sad for her secret love. Ino nodded with a frown. She would have to be blind to not notice her best friend's treatment. All of Naruto's friends saw his poor treatment at the hands of the villagers and some of the instructors, but he avoided answering their questions directly, much to their frustration. They gave up after a while and just accepted it as something he would tell them when he was ready. It's related to that, Ino-chan. He'll tell you all soon, so please be patient until then. The pretty Hyuga added, still looking a little downcast. Ino smiled a little as she reached over and squeezed one of Hinata's hands for reassurance. They remained silent for a minute until Ino suddenly spoke up. Right now, I'm wondering how Naruto knew that particular bit of information about team assignments, and why he had to be so infuriating about not telling us outright. She grumbled while Hinata smiled. But he did tell us in his own way. You make it sound like it was an inside joke between you two. Ino quipped while Hinata had to work to hold back an unladylike snort of laughter. Ino had no idea how close she hit that nail on the head. Naruto-kun did tell us when he showed us that mischievous smirk and said it was inside information with emphasis on inside. Hinata felt a little apprehensive about the fact Naruto had yet to tell any of his other friends about his tenant. She was fairly sure they would take the news well. In fact, they would be more upset that he held the secret from them for so long instead. That was still his secret to tell, but it didn't mean she was going to stand by and let this continue though. It was time for her to start making suggestions to encourage him to tell the others soon. Hopefully all of this would be resolved before graduation in 8 months. I wish they would hurry up and finish this. I feel like another round. Kiba's impatient voice and his dog's accompanying barks snapped Hinata out of her thoughts as she absent-mindedly watched her future lover and the insect user still going at it strong. She thought back to how the abrasive heir to the Inuzuka clan joined this sparring and study group a few months ago. Kiba had been stubbornly making a nemesis out of Naruto for infringing on his self-claimed position as the alpha. Unfortunately for him, Naruto already established himself as the true alpha not just in his year, but in the entire academy, including the Chunin instructors, without even knowing or trying. Kiba, in his refusal to accept his instincts and his partner's increasingly frustrated advising, endured years of humbling losses to Naruto in spars and other competitions before he swallowed his pride and asked to train with the group in order to improve himself. He hadn't looked back since. Hinata knew Kiba would never admit this, but he was grateful to Naruto and the others for welcoming him into the group with big smiles. Shino's admission into the group was at around the same time as Kiba's and much simpler. He saw the logic of improving his skills with the group and just asked outright. The sound of a fist striking flesh followed by a grunt of pain brought Hinata out of her thoughts completely as she focused on the spar, only to be surprised to see Naruto sprawled out on the ground with Shino standing tall over him, displaying some surprise on his face as well. A glance to both sides revealed confused expressions from the other spectators. She wasn't the only one then. They all stood to move over to Naruto, who was sitting up cross-legged and rubbing a bruise on his cheek. Shino's expression changed from barely visible surprise to barely visible scowl. Naruto-san, while I firmly believe my taijutsu to be adequate at this point, I do know you're holding your abilities back to allow us to improve ourselves faster. It would not be training if we lose to you within seconds each spar. However, to play at losing seems insulting. His even tone was laced with a hint of being offended. Sorry, Shino. I never intended for anyone to feel that way. It's true I'm holding myself back, but I really did lose to you this time. Naruto replied with no hint of lying as he brought himself to his feet. That set off a wave of confusion through everyone assembled around him until Shikamaru broke the silence with a bored snort. Troublesome, you're using a seal. He stated this as if it was a sure thing. Naruto smirked while the others looked at the pineapple-haired boy in surprise. Leave it to you to figure it out already, Shika. Watching you sparring just now compared to before, there was a difference in how you held yourself. In the past, you had to make a measured effort to hold back for our sake. We may not like that, but it was necessary for training if we're going to eventually reach your level in the future. This time, you seemed to genuinely struggle a little, as if you were handicapped one way or another. Therefore, your statement confirmed it was most likely seals. Gravity or resistance seal, I'm guessing. Shikamaru concluded in his usual bored tone. Naruto nodded in confirmation of his friend's deduction. Seal? I don't see any on him. Ino pointed out in confusion. That's because it's not visible. Most seals painted on skin usually hide themselves after they were activated, Naruto replied for his fellow blonde. May we observe it? Shino asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Sure, if the pretty ladies present doesn't mind since I have to take my shirt off. Naruto said with a foxy grin. Hinata and Ino blushed at the idea of seeing him topless but nodded their consent. A moment later, his shirt was discarded on the ground, much to the red-faced girls' hidden delight as their eyes took in the pleasant sight of his lean but muscular torso shining with sweat under the bright sun. He was just beginning to form a six-pack already, a good sign of his body growing up and gaining more muscle mass. Better choices out there, indeed. Ino muttered quietly to her friend with a saucy smirk. Hinata knew Ino was teasing her, but it still irritated her when she was reminded that other girls would begin to look at Naruto with lust just because of his appearance soon enough. However, she was surprised when an image of Ino running her hands up and down his torso sensually flashing through her mind didn't automatically make her growl and get possessive of her secret love. In fact, it made her a little curious, and a little hot, to watch her secret love make her friend feel good in front of her. Imaging him with a civilian girl she only saw once made her insides flare up in rage, so it wasn't just any random girl, but when she imagined him with a girl she and Naruto personally knew well and liked, like Ino, it made her very curious. It was like she was sharing a secret but incredible joy with only a select few. Even now, when Ino was clearly ogling Naruto's muscles, Hinata didn't feel threatened at all. She dwelled on this confusing emotion while Naruto turned his back to the crowd and channeled some chakra to his back. I came across this little piece of work in one of the books Ero-sennin lent me and figured it would be a good way to handicap and train myself at the same time. This way, I'd have some fun training with you guys. I mean, no offense, but I actually was getting bored having to consciously hold myself back. Naruto explained as an intricate seal matrix shaped like a pentagon, with a thick dot at each of the 5 corners, faded into existence, covering almost all of his back. Thick black lines connected to the 2 dots on the seal's left side were drawn around his body. One snaked its way up over his shoulder, then followed a winding path down his left arm before ending with another black dot on his wrist. The other snaked its way once around the torso before going straight down his left leg to end at the calf. If the other 3 dots around the pentagon were active, there would have been 5 thick lines drawn all over his body, as if they were actively trying to slow him down. Shikamaru frowned. You're already at level 2. Just how long have you had this seal? Since last week? Naruto's unsure reply caused his jaw to drop in shock. What's going on? It's rare for us to see you like that, Shika. Kiba piped in as he continued to look over the odd artwork on Naruto's back. The girls continued to blush as they watched some of the muscles in his well-toned back shift and flex whenever Naruto moved his head and arms around a little. Hinata was peeking adorably between the fingers on her hands covering her red face, and Ino was trying, and failing, to keep up an uninterested expression as her pale blue eyes hungrily took in every detail she could. Shino and Choji watched and chewed in silence respectively. You're telling me you skipped over level 1 already? Shikamaru demanded with a twitching eyebrow. That didn't do anything, so I just went on to level 2 to actually feel some resistance. Thanks to the sadistic teachers I have, I guess. Naruto shrugged as if this was no big deal. The Nara clan heir slapped a hand to his forehead in frustration and actually growled aloud, much to everyone's surprise. Damn it, every time I think I have you figured out, you just blow everything to hell and I have to start over. He ranted at a sheepish Naruto. He exhaled slowly, then calmed himself down after a moment, and decided to elaborate for his confused friends, although one of his eyebrows was still twitching. Troublesome. This is what we call a resistance seal. It increases resistance a person's body encounters through the air as if it grew thick enough that it's difficult to move around properly, let alone train. It increases strength, speed, and agility all at once as you do simple everyday things and exercises, and it continually improves every muscle you use without even thinking about it. Compared to gravity seals, a resistance seal takes longer to train with but promises a well-balanced body in the end. Gravity seals provide faster results, but they're usually localized on limbs and too harsh on a growing body. The genius of the group lectured to his captivated audience. Even Naruto was listening intently. Resistance level 1 would feel like you're trying to wade through water at a run. If one was to suddenly jump to level 2 from 0, it would feel like moving through very thick mud. The top level, which is 5, would feel like you're trying to walk through a concrete wall. Naruto is implying he's so used to level 1 he's getting around like normal that he's moved on to the next level already. It'll be a while before he reaches level 3 though, since getting to the next level increasingly takes longer each time. If he was to deactivate the seal in battle, his speed and strength would look like they shot up exponentially. He concluded to the stunned audience. During my spar with Shino just now, it felt like my entire body was moving a half second behind my mind, so it's taking more effort to make sure most of his attacks didn't go through. I also had to carefully plan out my strikes to not waste my energy doing useless things like I would have at full power, Naruto supplied as he picked up his t-shirt, not noticing the slightly disappointed expressions on the girls' faces as they thought the show was over too quickly. The boys nodded as they processed what they learned. Ano, would it be possible to put this on any of us? Hinata asked shyly. However, Naruto suddenly blushed bright red and his body became jerky as he was tugging his shirt back on. He became so distracted he slipped an arm into the wrong hole and nearly tripped over his own feet fighting his shirt before his head and arms finally found the right holes. He still didn't look the girls in the eyes though. The girls wondered what was wrong with the usually confident and sure-footed Naruto. Shikamaru chuckled, as if he knew an inside joke this time. If he drew this on himself, he can put it on others as well. However, I think you'd probably balk at what's involved in the process of drawing the seal. It's fine with us boys though. Shikamaru answered for the suddenly bashful Naruto with a smirk. What's wrong with us girls? Ino demanded with a confused frown. However, Hinata seemed to have realized the problem, and she completely covered her face with both hands and a squeak of "eep" escaped from underneath. Why you'd have to be completely topless for me to be able to draw the seal on your back without any obstacle? Naruto finally answered, much to the girls' embarrassment. Kiba and Choji blushed at the image while Shino continued to look stoic, but even he couldn't resist a slight tinge of red on his cheeks as well. Shikamaru chuckled at the scene, much to Ino's irritation before she cleared her throat. I guess I'll have to pass on that for now," she murmured demurely, her red cheeks a stark contrast to her pale skin. Hinata's dark red blush extended all the way down her neck into her light blue overcoat. However, for some reason, she suddenly had a shot of courage and decided to let a little of it out. "I wouldn't mind, if it's you, Naruto-kun," Hinata whispered so quietly behind her hands that almost no one heard her, except for Naruto with his advanced hearing. That was her intention, however. His wide eyes snapped to her in an instant, and was surprised to see Hinata slowly remove her hands, revealing a resolute expression as she stared back at him. Her blush was still showing, but her pale lavender-tinted eyes were unwavering and seemed hopeful, as if she was daring him to come upon an answer he didn't know he was searching for. Did she know he might have heard her? He spent a moment trying to decide if he was just imagining this or not before he was interrupted by Kiba excitedly asking to have the seal drawn on him. Shino was right behind him asking in his usual stoic manner. Looking back at Hinata, he saw that she was now talking and giggling with Ino, although a small blush was still visible on her cheeks. Naruto decided to put aside his confusion for the moment as he shifted his attention to other things. However, His mind lingered a little on the image of him carefully drawing the seal on Hinata's soft and smooth back while she was topless, and he had to admit it was a pleasing thought, and he liked it a lot. Would he be able to continue seeing her as just friend forever? Did he want to? Inside Naruto's other seal, the great demon fox, Kurama, grinned wide in triumph, having heard her host's thoughts just now. A crack in his incredible denseness was finally forming, and this day couldn't have come soon enough. A couple hours later, on the way back to the village, Naruto's mind was still dwelling on what Hinata whispered to him about drawing the seal upon her. Did she really mean that? Maybe she only said that because she trusted him, like a best friend should. However, the way she said it and that look in her eyes afterward made him think otherwise. She was a beautiful and kind girl, and Naruto would have to be a blind fool not to see that. However, he always thought they would be nothing more than friends since she hadn't said anything or made any aggressive move toward the idea of developing a romance between them. Now that he was watching for any hidden intent from her since Kurama's heavy-handed hinting last month, he suddenly noticed the secret ways she was looking at him, the beautiful smile she displayed when he was happy or excited over something, the glares she sent towards some girls that looked at him in a weird way, and the way her eyes and smiles still lit up the day even after years of commenting on how good her bentos were. After seeing all that, something told him she was looking for more from their relationship. Now he had to ask himself, did he read the signals correctly? Not that I mind, but you're staring at me when we should be looking ahead, Naruto-kun. A familiar shy, but slightly teasing, voice broke Naruto out of his thoughts, and his eyes came into focus upon Hinata's blushing face. Her slightly pink lips curved upward into a small smile, as if she was secretly happy about something, and her half-lidded gaze shifted to the ground in front of her now that she had his full attention. The blonde had to force himself to break away from her beautiful visage to glance around, and saw that he was walking on automatic with Hinata back to her clan's compound. He blushed upon being caught staring at her, but Hinata didn't seem to mind at all, if her widening grin and reddening cheeks were anything to go by. Oh Kami, yes. Finally. He's looking at me differently now compared to before. Kami-sama and whoever else is up there, please. Please let the day Naruto-kun sees how much I'm in love with him come soon. The indigo-haired young woman was praying hard in her mind as her eyes burned holes in the back of Naruto's head as if trying to send him a message. They walked in what seemed to be increasingly tense silence until she finally broke it. Ah no, she tried to speak before blushing and shifting her gaze downward again. She was nervous about something. You want something, Hinata-chan? Naruto hoped whatever Hinata had to say would move this tense silence to a more lighter atmosphere. Naruto-kun. Aye. Yes? Please draw the resistance seal on me. She finally got out in a quick burst after hesitating many times, with a dark red blush continually growing on her face the entire time. Naruto's hope for a lighter conversation was shattered as he stopped and stood rooted to the spot while Hinata stopped as well with her eyes closed in embarrassment, but she stood firm. Hinata-chan. Do you know what you're saying? He frantically shouted as his arms flailed around. Hinata kept her eyes closed but nodded firmly, her long indigo hair whipping around from the force. I'm not sure you heard me back there, but you'll have to be topless. You'd be able to cover up your front, but I would still see a lot more of you than we're used to. Naruto tried to give her a way out. This was going too fast for him. He was starting to see her as a growing woman, and now he was about to see a lot of her than he was comfortable with. Any more he had to say died in his throat, however, when Hinata opened her pale eyes and looked straight into his wide blue eyes and seemed to ensnare him with her determined stare. I trust you completely, Naruto-kun. You have no idea how utterly sure I am that you won't ever hurt me intentionally. Hinata proclaimed with such firmness in her voice that let Naruto know immediately he wasn't able to doubt her sincerity in this. He was happy and flattered at the absolute faith she had in him. It also made him terrified of hurting her even accidentally. He fidgeted for a moment, trying to come up with another reason. Do this or I will test the theory on if you can die for real or not when I rip apart your astral body in our mindscape. Repeatedly. Kurama growled from inside. Would you really do that? You know the seal will prevent any true killing intent from you and it'll hurt like a bitch. I'm willing to push that boundary if I have to. Now say that three-letter word that begins with a Y and ends with S, or I'll be using your bones to pick my teeth. The fox roared loud enough it actually rattled the mindscape. Naruto winced a little before sighing in defeat. Okay, yes. I have no problem doing this for you, Naruto finally said before he was engulfed by Hinata in a bone-crushing hug. Thank you. I'm happy to hear that. When should I come over to get this done? She excitedly asked as she stepped back, a hopeful expression on her face. Naruto had to chuckle at his friends, or was it more than friend, excitement? When I discussed this with the guys, we decided this coming Friday would be the best time since they would have the weekend to get used to the seal before class on Monday. I made time for them in the afternoon after class that day, though. You should wait till later that evening if you want the privacy. At least you'll have the weekend to get used to the seal and hopefully it won't affect your everyday performance too much, he explained while Hinata agreed with the logic of this arrangement. Ino-chan will likely be interested in getting this as well. I think she only declined because it was in front of too many people. Would it be okay if I invite her along as well? I know she trusts you too, she added. She figured Naruto might be more comfortable with her if there was another person there, despite the fact Ino would be going topless as well. Naruto almost balked at the thought of drawing on two soft and delicate-looking backs instead of just one like he imagined in his original erotic thought. That was his old crush after all. He shook it off after a moment. If she wants to come, it's fine. Hinata nodded with a smile and they resumed their walk on the trail through the thick forest between the village and the training ground. After a moment, Naruto's expression darkened suddenly. Did you feel that? That annoying fucker is back. Kurama growled, her brief good mood at seeing Naruto making progress with Hinata ruined by a presence she was used to sensing over the past few weeks. I know. I was fine with this if it's just me he's spying on. Now that Hinata-chan's here, the situation's changed and I'm going to teach that bastard a lesson. Chase him down like the pathetic lapdog he is and put the fear of the Kyuubi in him. Kurama cackled uproariously, finally excited for a little bit of action. Naruto-kun. Hinata's whisper trailed off. She had just noticed Naruto's distress and discreetly activated her Byakugan to find a familiar figure hiding up in one of the trees about 50 meters behind them off to the right. Can you wait here for a few minutes, Hinata-chan? He's been tailing me for weeks, but this is the first time he's spying on me with one of my friends. I'm not going to stand for that. I will not have anyone else, especially you, get involved. Naruto whispered darkly. Hinata smiled slightly at his fierce protectiveness of her for a moment before she became concerned. Naruto-kun, he's someone we know. I'm not going to stop you, but please try not to hurt him too much. Naruto nodded before he stopped completely and tensed his body as he turned his head slightly, one eye locking onto where his follower was. The spy immediately realized he was made and jumped into full retreat deeper into the forest. The suddenly feral-looking blonde then fully turned around with a loud hair-raising snarl, his elongated fangs bared in full display and his blue eyes shifting to glowing red. Seeing his almost animalistic display of protectiveness over her sent a strange but pleasant wave of heat throughout Hinata's body that made her knees buck a little. When she snapped out of her brief wide-eyed daze, Naruto was already speeding after the spy into the forest, and was swallowed by the thick foliage. It would be nearly impossible for the spy to lose him now thanks to his sensitive nose and ears. Hinata wobbled a little over to a nearby tree just off the trail and carefully sat down against it. She then instinctively rubbed her thighs together a few times and, suddenly, all of her being became completely focused on the waves of a new tingling sensation coming from between her legs that traveled all the way up the spine into the very roots of her hair, making her gasp and almost moan aloud. She silently thanked her caretaker, Tomo, for the embarrassing, but extremely informative, talk not too long ago when she started on the path to womanhood with her menarche. Because of what she learned from Tomo, and the Academy's standard sex education lesson as well, she wasn't confused about this new but pleasant sensation since she now understood she was very aroused. More importantly, it was Naruto-kun that caused this, and he didn't even intend it. I wonder what'll happen if he actually looked at me with want in his eyes. She thought happily and had to quickly stop picturing Naruto's beautiful blue eyes darkening slightly with wanton lust and love. Otherwise, she would have forgotten her surroundings, and just let her hands do what they were itching to do for the past few minutes. Instead, she wondered if she was going to have to get privacy from her father and Hanabi later this evening to try what Tomo taught her about how to relieve herself. For now, Hinata just let the tingling fade away slowly, leaving behind a warmth that spread through her. She quietly enjoyed the pleasant sensations with a content smile as she waited for Naruto. In the forest he shouldn't have been able to detect me. He also somehow managed to make me lose my brush and ink in here as well, Sai thought calmly as he hid inside a nook of a large tree after escaping deep into the forest. He had just noticed Naruto managed to rip the satchel containing his art supplies off his waist during his escape. It was a close call because he was feeling hot breaths down his neck for a few minutes before he managed to lose his pursuer with a few smoke bombs and basic traps. Taking a moment to rest from the quick but intense pursuit, he worked over what happened for him to be found out only to realize there was nothing he did wrong. Therefore, his target found him out of his own accord. The only question left was, how long had Naruto known he was being tailed? As the spy tried to bring his heavy breathing under control and think over his observations of Naruto, the regular noises of the forest all ceased completely. He jerked his head up at the lack of sound and actually felt a small shiver go down his spine. Suddenly, a loud growl from his left made his heart leap into his throat as he instinctively rolled forward into a tight ball, barely avoiding a clawed hand swiping at his head. In the next instant, he heard something crack loudly. As he shot out of the roll into a ready stance, he spared a glance behind to see a hand-sized hole in the tree he was hiding in. The person responsible was nowhere to be seen. As the spy's body froze for an instant with indecision due to his inability to see his attacker at the moment, his head jerked upward when he heard another growl from above and was momentarily shocked to see an orange-clad Naruto descend on him, face set in an angry snarl and clawed hands aimed right for his own face. "Sai!" he roared as he landed on nothing but grass when Sai rolled out of the way again. The black-clad root agent kept an emotionless gaze on Naruto as the blonde dashed forward on all fours with abandon, his clawed hands swiping at him like a furious leopard. Sai barely kept out of the reach as he scrambled backward over fallen tree limbs and giant roots for what felt like the longest minute in his life, keeping his black eyes focused on Naruto's clawed hands. The blonde's swipes were getting more accurate and seemed to be focused on slashing at his prey's vitals now. Finally, an unexpected slash ripped through Sai's shirt in the stomach, and he wondered how he managed to avoid having his guts spill out onto the forest ground as his pale stomach became visible and remained unblemished for now. After a few more seconds of avoiding slashes from everywhere, his back hit against a thin tree leaning at a 45-degree angle away from him. Seeing no other direction he could go in front of Naruto's ferocious charge, he acrobatically somersaulted up and backward out of one of Naruto's slashes and onto the tree to continue scrambling backward up the tree with chakra, keeping an intense gaze on his pursuer at the bottom of the tree. He was confused when Naruto didn't go up the tree after him. Instead, he was smirking before swiping at the base of the tree with a growl of exertion. Sai's eyes widened in shock when the tree was actually lopped off its stump with a loud crack. With the tree now free to fall, he let out a surprised yelp as he was brought down and landed hard on his feet. Unable to deal with the sudden shock of a landing like that, he was slowed to move while Naruto quickly charged at him again with another loud snarl, an arm raised for a strike. Sai was actually getting nervous at the look on his target's face. It felt like he was going to be ripped apart if he was caught. Deciding to forget his orders on not attacking his target in order to preserve himself, Sai unsheathed his tanto from his back quickly and lashed out with precision at Naruto's throat, expecting to force him back. He was actually surprised to see the next slice open and the shocked look in Naruto's eyes. That was for an instant before the blonde exploded into smoke, revealing a piece of wood. Sai was so taken aback by the successful kawarimi that he didn't even see the real Naruto coming at him from the side and, with a loud roar, slammed a hand onto his throat, forcefully dragging him back until his back hit a tree painfully. Sai grunted and coughed in pain but was already preparing to cut at the arm holding him up with his tanto before he stopped cold when his eyes locked onto Naruto's angry glare. The blonde reared his free clawed hand back to swipe at his captured prey's face. The spy's breath hitched as he experienced something he hadn't felt since his training in root, fear. Naruto saw the flicker of emotion in Sai's eyes and stayed his hand for the moment. He snarled once more before smirking menacingly. His glowing crimson-slitted eyes shifted back to their natural blue, but he tightened his hold on Sai's throat and pinned him high enough against the tree so only his toes barely touched the ground. Sai's face contorted in discomfort but didn't say anything even as his breathing was somewhat restricted. He was intending to swipe at Naruto with his tanto to get free but his left arm just wouldn't move for some reason. Naruto's smirk was still on his face as he seemed to search over Sai's expressionless face with curiosity. "So, this puppet can feel fear. Tell me, how do you get around with a hand shoved so far up your asshole and controlling you from within? Your insults will not work on me. I am curious how someone as dickless as you was able to detect me tailing you, though." Sai spoke as if he was talking about the weather, his empty black eyes boring into Naruto's. The blonde laughed maliciously. "You think I'm going to let you take that kind of information back to that old fossil? I've known about you ever since you started tailing me. I've been the model citizen during all that time, haven't I? Nothing out of place about me, I assume? No new information on my abilities, correct? His smirk widened when he saw Sai's eyes flash with some irritation at the lost time spying, since any information he gathered so far were likely all irrelevant now. You know about my master. Of course. It's hard not to when Hokage vaguely warned me about him, and I was too curious to ignore this. I just asked for information from someone else one day and got a lot more than I expected. Who told you? Sai fished, knowing Danzo would want this source eliminated. He grimaced when his captor tightened his fingers around the throat some more, cutting off the air for the moment. Ah. I'm the one holding your life in my hands, not you. You don't get to ask questions here. Naruto chided with a wagging finger, as if he was talking down to a toddler before loosening his hold enough to let in air again. Sai just remained silent. I don't care about getting any information out of you because I know that's a waste of time. To prove it, he forcefully grabbed Sai's cheeks with his free hand and squeezed painfully hard, forcing the mouth open to expose an odd-looking seal on the tongue. Huh. There's the binding seal. Just like my informant said. He observed offhandedly for a second before releasing Sai's cheeks and moving on. Instead, I'm going to talk by myself here for a minute. I have to admit I was a bit curious about you since you suddenly joined our class at the beginning of this year. That was unusual enough by itself. Then I noticed your emotionless persona and I just immediately knew you're with Root. If you're trying to be discreet, that didn't work. Just thought you'd know. As a somewhat famous prankster who manages to prank the entire ANBU regularly wearing all orange, my opinion on discretion probably holds a lot of sway with some people. Naruto added as an aside while Sai continued to stare at him blankly. I assumed the reason you were inserted into the class was either because of the Uchiha, Prince of the Assholes, or me, the friendly neighborhood jinchuriki. When I noticed you following me, it answered that question since I was wondering when old Danzo was going to try something with me. I figured it was well past time that flaccid old cripple dash. He was stopped by a flash of anger in Sai's eyes before the Root agent swung his tanto with all his effort at Naruto's neck. The calm blonde was expecting it as he caught his left arm by the forearm easily and, with no warning to Sai, squeezed it hard enough to snap both the radius and ulna bones. Sai allowed a grunt of pain as his now useless arm dropped the tanto, but he still kept his smoldering glare fixed on Naruto's cool gaze. Ah. Anger is something else this puppet feels too. Don't worry, I made sure they were clean breaks. They'll heal quickly when you go to a medic later. Now, before I was rudely interrupted. Naruto paused for a moment with a raised eyebrow before continuing. It was well past time that flaccid old cripple was starting to get interested in my business because I'm the big scary jinchuriki he can't control. As much as I'd like to run to Hokage and tattle on this old fossil, I figured if I just acted normal, he'd lose interest and move on to annoy other people with his little secret club. Naruto spoke easily, but Sai felt some pressure in the air building up around the two of them. His eyes changed from anger to uncertainty. A bead of sweat went down his right temple as he watched Naruto close his eyes for a moment before opening to reveal glowing crimson eyes once again, and his blackening lips pulled back to bare his fangs. Sai saw some red chakra seeping out of the blonde's body, making his body shiver involuntarily. The intimidating chakra then began to form a shape behind over Naruto's shoulder, and it resembled a certain large fox's head, and it was grinning sinisterly. However, it all changed when you were watching me with my friends today. That went beyond unacceptable. I was perfectly fine letting you see what I'm allowing you to see as long it was just me. When you got someone else involved, all bets are off. Naruto roared into Sai's face, making him tremble involuntarily with a small whimper despite his emotional training. The fox's head grinned wider as if it sensed weakness before it opened its large maw, revealing sharp teeth, and it snapped at his face repeatedly as if preparing to chew it off. With each snap of its jaw, the chakra's terrible presence increased, pressing down on every single inch of Sai's body. His eyes were wide with terror, and he felt like he was going to suffocate under the combination of Naruto's anger and the chakra's pressure. He couldn't help it when his entire body trembled violently, and his breaths were coming short and hard. This has gone on long enough. You're lucky that if I left your body rotting here, it'll create a hassle for me, especially when I'm going to graduate soon. Instead, I'm going to leave you here with these broken bones as reminder that your little spy game is over. Tell that senile old fool that if I ever catch you or anyone else spying on even a pebble in my presence again, I'll gladly deposit the bodies in front of the Hokage Tower in broad daylight for all to see with return to Shimura Danzo clearly written on them. I doubt he would like that. Naruto growled before his feral features slowly retracted and the red chakra disappeared instantly. He then abruptly slammed the root agent's head against the tree to make his point, making Sai's vision explode with stars. The blonde released his hold and Sai sank to his knees coughing with his usable hand clutching at his abused throat, and he was fighting back the lull of unconsciousness. Naruto took a torn satchel, which contained some art supplies and a small book, out of his jacket, silently dropped it with a light thump, and gave the still trembling Sai one last glare before he turned around and started walking away. Remember this. I had no reason to leave you alive, let alone even return that worn book that's apparently important to you. You should also thank Hinata-chan for the fact the rest of your bones aren't broken like your forearm. You just came close to death in an ill-advised spying mission that failed from the very onset. Think about that and your choice in bosses. Naruto's calm voice carried out into the air before he stepped into the thick foliage, back toward Hinata. Sai watched his retreating back until he was no more. Now alone, he let out a piteous whimper as he reached for the satchel and dragged it in to hug it tightly to his chest. He then drew himself into a fetal position, trembling at how he barely survived his close-up view of the devil. A few minutes later, Naruto-kun! Hinata called out as she stood up from the tree, desperately hiding how hard it was for her to keep standing with her legs still feeling a little like jelly from her previous sensations. Naruto smiled brightly and waved as he came into view from out of the forest. Was everything okay while I was gone? He nonchalantly asked, not noticing the blush on Hinata's face as she remembered what she had been thinking about over the past 15 minutes. Everything's fine. I hope you didn't hurt Sai-sen too much. Hinata tried to direct the conversation to a new subject as they resumed walking toward the village. Nothing a medic couldn't fix. I think he knows to stay away now, though. Naruto cheerfully replied, ignoring the exasperated sigh from Hinata. Naruto-kun. She dragged out warningly as she started to bring up her patented glare. Naruto quickly backed up and brought his hands up defensively. Whoa! I held back, okay? I wanted to do a lot more to him. He should be happy he made off with a couple broken bones that medics can fix in almost an instant, and that was only because he tried to attack me even when he was at a complete disadvantage. Hinata let out a defeated sigh and decided that was good enough for now. They resumed walking again in silence for a moment before Naruto broke the silence. Hinata-chan. Yes, Naruto-kun? What's that smell? It smells like dash, ah. I just remembered. I'm late for training with father and I have to run ahead. Bye. Hinata's panicked voice was already fading toward the village as she left a stunned Naruto in the dust. Why did this remind me of the reactions from Yugao-san and Enko-chan from back then? He finally asked no one in particular. Kurama kept silent as she struggled with everything she had to not laugh uproariously at her host's confusion. Later that evening in an unknown location the tension in the dark and barren office was thick enough to cut with a sword as Sai, his left arm encased in a brace for the mending bones, silently awaited his master's reaction on one knee. He had just relayed everything that happened in the forest, and now Danzo was staring down at his pawn with his one cold eye. This is most distressing, he finally said after a few minutes of considering what Sai had to report. He did not like how Uzumaki Naruto had been acting lately, and now this little shit had made a mockery of him and his entire organization with his actions and words. It seemed apparent that Naruto might not necessarily put this village's security above his personal friends' safety if they didn't correspond with each other. The root leader frowned in frustration as he was reminded again of Sarutobi Hiruzen's constant refusal to have Naruto trained as an emotionless weapon unable to go against Konohagakure. He knew the jinchuriki was training himself and that one of his senseis was Jiraiya, a student of Hiruzen that also advocated that blasted philosophy of peace. Beyond this, he didn't have enough information and that was unacceptable to him. Feeling like this was getting out of his control, he made a decision. Sai, watching the slight twitching of muscles on Danzo's face, easily deduced his master was about to make a knee-jerk reaction to his growing inability to keep the jinchuriki under his personal control. He had an hunch this was going to end badly for everyone involved. However, he was not trained to trust his hunches, and who was he to countermand his master's teachings? The fact that Naruto had given him a lot to think about would have to wait for another time. You're dismissed. We will discuss your failure later, Danzo said coldly as he watched Sai silently nod his head in acknowledgement and vanished from sight. The grizzled old man then took out a blank scroll and wrote down some information for someone that would be very interested in the recent development. If he couldn't have his weapon, then he wanted it out of Konoha at least. Having no weapon was better than having one that could turn around and aim in your direction, in his opinion. Friday evening at Yamanaka Flowers, the bell above the store's front door chimed and Ino looked up from the counter to see her friend, Hinata, walk in. They smiled happily upon seeing each other. Ino was wearing normal civilian clothes, a purple t-shirt, white capri pants, and white civilian sandals. Hinata wore her usual overcoat, but under it was a simple black t-shirt, a pair of black pants, and her black ninja sandals. "Welcome to this humble and undeserving establishment. How may I help you, Lady Hyuga?" Ino jokingly simpered like a saleswoman. Hinata giggled at the silliness. "Are you about to get off work, Ino-chan?" "Not just yet," Ino muttered as she looked up at the clock which just struck 6 and now I'm off. "I have to close up though, so I'll need to do that, then let Mom and Dad know where I'm going," she said as she hopped over to the front door to flip the sign to closed and grabbed a broom from a nearby nook. "Actually, I want to buy something from this shop to take to Naruto-kun's. I intend for it to be a thank you present from us for drawing the seals. I also would like it to serve a second, but more important purpose," Hinata explained. Ino raised an eyebrow at her friend while she was sweeping the floor. "Since it's also a present from me too, it's only fair you don't pay for it. I mean, we run a large store. One pot of anything isn't going to be missed," she offered. Hinata almost wanted to protest, but decided to let her friend have this one since she knew more about plants and how this store was run. "So what's the second purpose?" Ino queried as she moved on to sprinkling the plants with some water to tide them over for the night. "It needs to have a pleasant fragrance strong enough to fill a room but gentle on Naruto-kun's sensitive nose. It should be something that's easy to take care of and it can go without water for some time. It also should be visually appealing enough to Naruto-kun for him to keep it around in the living room and nowhere else in his apartment." Hinata listed out her ideal plant. Ino put the sprinkler away and struck a thoughtful pose. "I know of a few species that fits what you want, and the good news is that we have an overstock on one of them. We were going to get rid of some to free up space, so this solves that problem since it's not going to be missed at all," she exclaimed, happy at this being an easy enough request to fulfill. "Now that I'm done cleaning, I'll need to do some quick potting in the back to prepare the plant for Naruto's place. It'll only take a minute if you don't mind," she then offered, to which Hinata nodded enthusiastically, looking forward to seeing what her friend came up with. After a few minutes of working and slipping into the attached house to quickly clean herself up and inform her parents where she was going, the platinum blonde came back out into the shop carrying a medium-sized pot with 3 long wooden stakes stuck straight into the fertilizer that rose 3 feet into the air. At the base of each of the stakes were 2 beautiful violet flowers formed into several tightly clustered racemes hanging upside down. Hinata were in awe of their beauty, and then the fragrance hit her nose. The scent was somewhat strong but not too sweet or spicy, and it reminded her of the aftermath of a summer rainstorm. She knew immediately this was a good choice. "Ino-chan, I just know Naruto-kun would love this. As always, you're great with flowers," she praised excitedly while Ino ducked her head in embarrassment. "These are called wisteria. It's easy to take care of and can survive on little water. I'm sure you also noticed it smells great. Naruto will have to watch these little troublemakers though, as they like to grow fast, and they try to crawl up the nearest vertical surface, which is why I have the stake set up. This is perfect. It'll do the job nicely. I'm getting the feeling this is more for our benefits than Naruto's." "Spit out. What aren't you telling me, Hinata-chan?" Ino looked at her friend with some suspicion. Hinata chuckled nervously and considered what to say to the blonde. "If you're ready, I'll tell you on the way." And with that, the girls left the store with a pot of wisteria in tow. "Okay, Ino-chan. You know we're going over to Naruto-kun's to have the seal painted on us." Hinata began with a blush. Ino blushed at the implications of that activity as well. "You've always known how much I love Naruto-kun," Hinata murmured shyly, and Ino smiled, happy she was trusted with that information long ago, though she had to ignore a small pang of pain in her chest when she thought about how her friend would have most of Naruto's attention soon enough. "Of course. Lastly, our bodies are now changing and we're feeling some new things. Right?" Ino's unsure reply didn't surprise Hinata, as this was a tangent no one was expecting. "Ano, this is embarrassing, but I trust you not to tell anyone else. I've begun imagining myself with Naruto-kun in various ways. Why you mean like KK kissing and stuff? Ino stuttered, not expecting this topic at all. And more than that. Hinata's frank admission was enough to send the blonde's imagination into overdrive, and she blushed at the images. I see. I'll admit I've been having some thoughts like that sometimes, she admitted, and she faintly remembered all those thoughts always seemed to involve Naruto in one way or another. She mentally shook that train of thought off before it led into dangerous territory. I still don't see what this has to do with the wisteria. We're going to see Naruto-kun in a private setting. I'm going to show my bare back to him. I'm going to feel a little thrill when I wonder if I would accidentally flash him somehow at some point. Then he's going to be touching gently and carefully all over my skin with these calloused hands of his as he draws the seal. Do you understand where I'm coming from? Hinata painted the likely scenario, her cheeks flaming red as she imagined it all being done to her. She knew Ino got it as she watched her friend's pale skin turn bright red as well. Yes, I'm going to be incredibly aroused, and it will be frustrating when I can't act on it until the next time I'm alone, she added. Ino kept her gaze on the ground as her head continued to look like a tomato. She was now feeling some heat spread through her body as she imagined the delightful scenario Hinata described. Only she was taking her friend's place. Naruto-kun has a sensitive nose, and I've discovered recently he's able to easily smell arousal coming from any female. That's why I wanted the wisteria. It'll likely be the dominant scent in the room, and Naruto-kun won't focus too much on the other scent. Hinata finally got to the point of her little plan. Ino looked over at her friend in shock, her heated imagination forgotten. You know all this and you're still going through with this? I want the resistance seal, and I trust only him to draw any seal on any part of my body. No one else. If everything goes right in the future, we'll likely be dating, and I won't mind him knowing how much he turns me on. But right now, it's just a little embarrassing, and I wanted to avoid having him catch on for a while longer. It's okay if you want to back out. I wouldn't blame you. What? Hinata-chan, what makes you think I would get excited by Naruto? It's going to be completely professional between us tonight. Ino stammered, though Hinata saw uncertainty in her eyes and smiled somewhat pityingly at her friend's denial. Ino knew Hinata didn't believe her. Even she didn't believe herself either, damn it. She was beginning to see him less like a goofy runt of a brother she met when they were 5 and more like a growing man that had a lot of what she was going to want in her ideal man. As she was dwelling on that thought, a pleasant jolt shot through her spine and she howled in shock in the middle of a street that was empty by chance. After gritting through a violent shudder and quickly glancing around to see if anyone else saw her sudden outburst, she glared back at a smirking Hinata, removing a single finger from running it down her friend's spine lightly. You're very sensitive to touch, Ino-chan. I'm jealous. You'll be enjoying tonight a lot more than I'm going to, she remarked with an airy tone, then giggled. Ino narrowed her eyes. You know, sometimes I wonder if the world is ready for a mischievous and confident Hyuga Hinata. I don't understand why you're only this way with me and Hanabi-chan. It's not like Naruto's going to hate you if you're like this around him, she wondered. Hinata blushed at the mention of his name. I don't know. I just feel shy around him. I can't explain it. She struggled with her answer just as the girls reached the entrance to Naruto's apartment building. Both girls let out a sigh. Ready? They asked each other at the same time, making them start, then they chuckled nervously. They nodded silently this time and walked in. A minute later, one Uzumaki Naruto opened the door to his apartment, revealing his 2 female friends. Good evening, ladies. I hope everything's alright? I have a clone making tea for us now, he greeted with a bright smile as he stepped aside to let Hinata and Ino in before closing the door. The girls noticed he was wearing a loose dark blue tank top with a black pair of sport shorts. It was what he jokingly called his super awesome sealing outfit, since he picked the outfit to minimize the mess on his everyday clothes as he practiced his Fuinjutsu skills. They noted some bolts of ink peppering his exposed skin, apparently from his time with the boys earlier in the afternoon. The outfit, which displayed his muscular arms, strong neck, and impressive pectorals, was not going to help Hinata control her hormones, and she could tell her blonde counterpart was going to have the same issue from her blatant ogling. She gently elbowed her friend in the ribs when Naruto was not looking in their direction, making Ino jump slightly and gulp. Everything's great! She chirped a little too brightly, making Hinata almost roll her eyes in exasperation. Naruto noticed the gift in the brunette's hands. That smells good, he commented as he looked carefully at the potted plant. Ano, We made sure it's not too harsh on your nose, Ino-chan, and I wanted to give you a small thank you gift for doing the seal on us. I know there might be some awkward moments tonight, and we appreciate your willingness to deal with anything for us. Hinata explained with a shy smile. Naruto struck his usual sheepish pose with a nervous smile. If we do everything right, we won't have anything to worry about, he assured the girls. Ino shook her head. Nevertheless, we trust you whatever may happen, so don't be nervous. Naruto nodded and gently took the potted plant from Hinata's hands and set it on the coffee table in the living room. The two girls exchanged glances and shared a mischievous grin. I was thinking about getting a plant with some nice fragrance for the upcoming summer. Sort of like a natural air freshener in this room. I'm glad to see you girls took care of that with these wisteria. Thank you, Naruto said sincerely, shocking Ino completely. She wasn't expecting him to even know the name. While the wisteria thrived in this country's climate, it was still a plant that grew up mostly in the more humid land of water. She had to admit his impressive knowledge about plants was hot. Naruto, seeing the shocked look, had a twitching eyebrow. It is really that unbelievable that I knew something about this flower, Ino-chan? He grumbled, making her jump. Oh. I know you're smart, but I just wasn't expecting you to know something about a non-native plant. She tried to cover up her flustered reaction. Naruto grinned and shrugged. As you know already, I keep a few plants around this place. He swept his arm out at the various plants littering the apartment. I read books on the best way to take care of them, so that's how I learned about this plant. I just didn't expect it to smell this good, and it's not bothering my nose at all. You ladies made a good choice. Both girls beamed at his praise. Meanwhile, Hinata was watching Ino's reaction to Naruto's unexpected knowledge on plants, and she just knew he unwittingly scored a ton of points with the flower-crazy girl. Yet this still didn't bother her at all as she watched Ino look at Naruto in a different light. She decided to stop wondering about the odd lack of jealousy when it came to Naruto and Ino for the night, and just deal with anything as they came for now. How did it go with the boys earlier this afternoon? She decided to get some light conversation going. Naruto grimaced a little. Imagine me crammed into this living room with 4 shirtless and grunting boys. They were still sweaty from the spars at the academy earlier today and, at least to my sense of smell, they stunk up the room. That's why I was thinking about getting some new plants to get rid of any lingering odor. The girls giggled at their friend's small misfortune. It was funny when I finished doing the seal on Shika, though. He didn't get up from the floor or even moved a single finger for 5 minutes. When I asked him what was wrong, he complained it was too troublesome to move because of the seal. He drawled out the last bit in his impersonation of Shikamaru, making the girls snort with laughter. His smirk widened as he delivered the punchline. I told him that I finished drawing the seal, but it wasn't activated yet. He finished with a vulpine grin, making the girls collapse onto the couch with renewed laughter. Just then, a clone came in from the kitchen carrying cups of tea for its creator and the guests. The 3 made more conversation as they drank their tea. Despite the light talk, they all knew what was coming and a slight but nervous tension began to fill the air. When they finished their tea, all fell silent as the 3 young teens looked down nervously at the empty cups in their laps. It was Ino that finally broke the silence. I guess we should get started. The sooner we do this, the quicker we'll move on to other things. She finally said with her gaze still focused on her cup, a light dusting of red on her cheeks. Naruto took in a deep breath and let it out slowly to relax. Who'd like to go first? I'll do it, Hinata said quickly. Naruto nodded as he got up from his chair and stretched. Then he reached for a stack of prepared towels and handed one to her. I'm going to prepare a bowl of ink in my bedroom. That will take about 5 minutes. Use that time to get completely topless and lay out that towel on the floor, then lie face down on it. I will call out before I enter this room to make sure you're ready. That way I won't see anything you wouldn't want me to see. Drawing the seal will take about 15 minutes. I could do it a lot faster, but I want to be absolutely sure that every single bit of the seal is not out of order. He spoke with a professional tone, but a small blush forced its way onto his cheeks anyway. Hinata nodded resolutely to show that she understood. With that, he stepped out of the room. I like how he explained everything to us at the beginning. He was making sure we knew what was coming so we'd be more comfortable. Ino whispered from her place on the couch as she watched Hinata shrug off her overcoat, revealing a tight black t-shirt that didn't hide her growing bust at all. Even though she was still growing, Ino doubted very much she would catch up with Hinata in the bust department when they became full-fledged adults. I know. That's one of the many reasons why I love him. He was always considerate, and would gladly put his friend's safety and comfort ahead of his own. Even when he hadn't had his training, he jumped into a crowd of bullies without a second thought to protect me, even though it was the first time we met. We didn't even know each other's names until when he saved me from that Kumonin a few months later. Hinata whispered back, making sure Naruto didn't hear with his sensitive ears. She pulled the shirt off, revealing a white silk adult bra. It was conservatively styled, but it clearly showed the perfect teardrop shape of her breasts, and their size were clearly C-cup. I know about your size and everything, but it really annoys me when I actually see your boobs for real. The fact you're already wearing an adult bra compared to the training ones for the rest of us is a slap in our faces too. Ino growled out quietly, her eyebrows twitching with envy. I can't help it. It shouldn't even be possible for me. Almost all the women in my clan, including my own mother, are smaller than this, and I don't know why I'm the only one that's still growing. I'm already getting looks of betrayal from the others, including my own little sister. Hinata whispered back in a frustrated tone as she finished unclasping her bra, letting it fall off her shoulders. She blushed and tried to cover her naked bust with her hands under Ino's twitching glare as she made her way over to the towel that was carefully laid next to the coffee table where the wisteria sat in order to maximize the chance of the fragrance covering up what would be her obvious arousal. She then laid down on it face down, exposing her back to the world as she pulled her long indigo hair to the side out of the way and tucked her folded arms into her sides to hide any side view of her breasts. A few seconds later, Naruto's voice called out loudly and clearly from the hallway. I'm ready. Are you decent, Hinata-chan? Yes. You may come in. Naruto spent the past 5 minutes mentally preparing for this when he stepped into the living room with a brush and a bowl of special ink in his hands. However, he still couldn't help but gulp as his eyes took in the wonderful expanse of pale and smooth skin on Hinata's back that looked like caressing it would be one of the worst sins in the world. He shook himself out of his brief daze and cleared his throat. The first thing I'm going to do is kneel next to you at your hips and I will set down my sealing stuff, he clearly announced in a professional tone. The girls appreciated Naruto going out of his way to make sure they were comfortable with him by explaining what he was going to do next. I am going to put both my hands on your back for a moment to clear away any possible stray hair, thread, or lint from your shirt. It's to make sure nothing would physically interfere with the seal being drawn on, Naruto said as he finished kneeling next to Hinata. Her breathing hitched slightly before she slowly nodded her head and her entire body shivered slightly with anticipation. Naruto gulped a little before he reached down and lightly touched his hands to the small of her back. He knew right away as he felt the texture of Hinata's skin that this was 100 times better than silk, and he felt like he was committing a great sin and getting away with it. He used a brief time to burn the texture into his memory. Hinata used everything she had to hold in her loud gasp of appreciation as she felt her secret love's callous hands touch her back directly for the very first time in her life. Naruto couldn't see Hinata's face from where he was kneeling, but Ino clearly saw it from where she was sitting next to Hinata's head to offer any support if needed. She had to admit watching her friend's eyes flutter, her jaw clenching to hold back any sound of arousal, her hands coiling into tight fists underneath her chest, and her toes curling inward was awe-inspiring. Did his hands truly feel that good? She knew she was even more sensitive. How was she going to deal with this? Hinata felt like the brief period of time that Naruto was caressing her were the longest in her life, as she felt shockwaves of intense heat spread throughout her body, and it took all she had not to instinctively arc her back upward for more of his wonderful touch. When he reached the top of her shoulders and removed his hands, now finished clearing her back of any possible debris, Hinata then felt like that brief moment was far too short, and she couldn't resist a disappointed groan at the sudden loss of contact. You alright, Hinata-chan? Naruto asked, concerned. I'm fine. I'm a little ticklish and I was making sure not to move around under your touch. Please continue, Naruto-kun. Hinata lied quickly, keeping her obvious desire for a lot more than a brief moment out of her voice. Okay. Now I'm going to actually draw the seal. I need to make sure it's perfectly centered on your back, so I need to somewhat straddle your hips to line your spine with my sideline. I'm not going to sit on you, so don't worry, Naruto assured.